What's the most unfair way you've seen someone get fired? I have a friend who had a PhD as a microbiologist and worked out in Silicon Valley. He was brilliant. He developed a rapid test for detecting resistant microorganisms that have netted his firm billions of dollars and saved countless lives. After he completed that, his female boss refused to give him any projects to work on and wanted him to, quote, let the female employees have a chance to shine now. For the next 3 years, he came to work, with no assignments, and just read or searched the internet for 8 hours a day. He literally sat on his ass all day and did nothing. His boss told the other employees not to bother him. He was getting bored and restless with no work and had a couple of discussions about it with his boss. His boss assured him everything was fine, that he just needed to relax for a little bit and let other employees take some credit. He and his wife had purchased a retirement home in Fort Lauderdale and they had been spending vacation time fixing it up for when they retire. He was not ready to retire and was still working after 65. Fast forward a couple months. One time when he was in Fort Lauderdale to work on the house, his company-owned cell phone suddenly quit working. He called his boss to see what was up. She told him that they were terminating him because he was not doing anything. They deposited his final check and a severance check directly to his bank account, and terminated his computer access including personal research notes. They hurled all his personal items from work, including delicate pieces of equipment, into a box without a care in the world. It was delivered to his apartment knowing he was out of town. It was placed by his apartment door. Fortunately, a neighbor found it and saved it for when he returned. Lastly, they demanded that he send his 10-year-old cell phone back by mail right now for whatever reason. The worst thing they did to him was to cash out his multi-million-dollar company retirement account and stocks and deposit it into his checking account so that he was suddenly responsible for federal and California income tax in one lump sum. He was devastated. And they refused to talk to him anymore. He is a pleasant, affable person who always wanted to help out his co-workers. We have known each other for 45 years and this was the first time I saw him cry. He decided to bail out of working anymore. It was a tremendous loss to the microbiology community and the lab tests that he could have brought to market to save countless people's lives. I can't believe someone of such honest, hard-working character could be set up like this.
I regret not leaving my wife for my mistress. I've been married for 5 years to a narcissist. I didn't realize what I was getting into because I never had a serious relationship before her. My parents were also narcissists, so I thought some red flags were normal, and things didn't really escalate until after we married. 2 years in, she cheated on me and said we needed to open the marriage to meet her needs or she'd leave me and go after alimony. I didn't want to lose her. I didn't want to give up a significant amount of my paycheck, and I'm a pushover who hates himself. So I agreed on the condition that she practice safe intimacy. I didn't see anyone for a while since I was busy with work, but she got a few boyfriends and had some one-night stands on top of it. She'd always talk about it in detail when we did have time together. I just emotionally checked out and tried to focus on other things. Then one time when she was staying with her boyfriend for 2 weeks and I had some free time, I visited an intimacy club. I'd never even stepped foot inside of one and had no idea what to expect, except that an attractive woman would pretend to like me if I paid her for it. Part of me wanted to have something to talk about when my wife came home to talk about her intimate experiences, but part of me wanted validation even if it was fake. I paid the entry fee, sat at the bar and got a drink. When I saw literally the most gorgeous girl I'd ever seen walk out. She looked almost AI generated, too perfect to exist. I watched her for a while in the crowd, and on stage, but I felt too nervous to talk to her. Eventually she did come over and greet me. We got to talking and actually had a lot in common. She said she was doing this gig her way through school and invited me for a dance. She brought up that the club offers VIP rooms by time, and since I brought lots of cash to burn, I took her up on that offer. By the end of that hour I was feeling on top of the world. We laughed, talked, joked and even danced together. I never had so much fun with anyone in my life. She said she normally doesn't see customers outside of the club ever, but gave me her real name and phone number. The next few months was a whirlwind romance that felt like out of a movie. We opened up to each other about a lot, and became really close. She brought out a confident and fun side of me I didn't even know I had. We could talk for hours on end and I couldn't stop thinking about her. The last time I saw her we finally did the deed. It was the best night of my life. She made me feel so desired and I loved returning the favor. Admittedly, I neglected my marriage during this time, but I didn't even feel guilty because of what my wife had put me through. My wife started to notice and became more controlling, and irritable. She knew I started seeing someone too, and seemed fine with it at first, but eventually she blew up. She said I had to cut off my girlfriend, and close our marriage or she'd follow through with divorce, or us aside. She cut off all her affair partners and started staying home 24/7. She became very paranoid and vigilant of what I was doing. She said my mistress was just a dumb SLT who was going nowhere in life, didn't care about me, was using me for my money, and I was stupid to throw away our marriage for her. My parents also sided with her. Her words kind of got to me and I convinced myself that my girlfriend really was using me and it was just her job, even though when I got her gifts and did things for her and saw her in the club a few times while we were dating, she never asked me to do any of those things. I called my girlfriend and cut things off with her. I was really apologetic about the situation. She was so understanding, more than I deserved, especially since I hadn't been completely open with her about everything at this point, but I could tell she was trying not to cry. I felt really bad, but I went through with doing what I felt needed to be done and tried to focus on my marriage. I also started therapy. It's been another couple of years. I've worked through issues in therapy and my wife's behavior has only gotten more abusive. We weren't able to move past everything and I don't think we ever will. We've only slept together once since then and it was nothing great. I think about my girlfriend every day. I have to think about her every time I rub one out or I can't get off, and adult films doesn't do anything for me anymore. I feel so emotionally and physically frustrated. I realized I love her and I can't believe what I gave up and what could have been. I hate myself for not being honest with her, for investing in my wife who seems to hate me more by the day. I wish I divorced my wife for her. If I divorce my wife now, I'm going to have to deal with dating again in my mid-30s, if any other woman can even come close to her anyways. My wife wants to have kids, but I keep putting it off because I'll probably end up ending myself soon enough and it wouldn't be fair to my children. I can't even be upset because this is the life I chose for myself and I'll have to just deal with it.
My cat, missing for 11 years, has been found. It's a miracle, and now they won't give him back. Back in 2012, my family and I moved to Oklahoma, bringing along our cherished feline friend, Shadow. He was just under 5 years old then. A mishap led to him escaping from our new home, and despite our relentless searching and holding on to hope, Shadow never returned. As the years passed, the painful realization settled in: Shadow was likely gone forever. Fast forward to 9 years later, a series of unfortunate events had us relocating back to my hometown. Among the aftermath of a devastating tornado, financial difficulties, and the struggle to get our lives back on track, an unexpected call brought a shimmer of hope into our lives. Shadow had been found. For the past 6 years, he had been living on a residential street, being fed by the locals, but never truly belonging to anyone. A recent encounter with some animal had left him needing minor medical attention, and that's when they discovered his chip, leading them straight to me. My joy was indescribable. After nearly a decade, my beloved cat had been found. The woman who had taken him to the vet was understanding of our financial situation, knowing that we couldn't make the trip to get him until the start of the next month. In the meantime, we pooled resources, scrimped, saved, and managed to scrape together enough funds to make the journey. But before I could bring Shadow home, I was hit with a shocking blow. Shadow had been given to another couple in the neighborhood. They had apparently fallen in love with him and decided to keep him. My attempts to contact them since have been met with silence. We had already mourned Shadow once, thinking him dead. Now, we were mourning him again, knowing he's out there but just out of our reach. This second loss is a devastating blow, one that makes our financial struggles seem insignificant in comparison. We'll recover financially eventually, but emotionally, this ordeal has left a lasting scar. Shadow, if only you knew how much you are loved and missed. We were so close to bringing you home, and it breaks my heart that we won't get to see you again. It's like losing you all over again, and it's a wound that may never fully heal. My controlling boyfriend did something crazy that crossed the line. I found out my boyfriend put hidden cameras in our apartment without telling me, and it made me feel really violated and uncomfortable. He said he did it for security reasons, thinking someone might have entered our place, but he also mentioned it was something he always wanted to do, and then claimed it was for our dog. He didn't tell me about the 2 cameras, and I had no idea where they were placed. One of them was aimed right at our bed and was cleverly hidden among things on our nightstand. I only discovered these cameras because he left his phone open, and I saw a video of me naked in bed. He was watching old videos from the cameras using a security app on his phone. He got mad at me for going through his phone, which I can understand to some extent, but it doesn't excuse the fact that he put these cameras in without talking to me. I feel like my privacy and personal space have been invaded. Our relationship hasn't been as close lately, and he's made comments suggesting that I might be having other people over or shouldn't be alone so much since I'm not being close with him. I haven't been seeing anyone behind his back. I've never given him a reason not to trust me, so I feel blindsided by his decision to start watching me without my knowledge or consent. I would never cheat on him, and we already spend most of our time together, so I don't know when he thinks I would be seeing other people anyway. He makes me feel like this is all my fault and that things should just go back to how they were, but I can't do that. I needed to share this somewhere because I feel embarrassed every time I try to talk to someone about it. This incident has really scared me, honestly, and his controlling behavior is making me rethink the entire relationship. Yet I feel really nervous and hesitant to leave. If this is how he's acting while we're still together, how would he react if I told him I was leaving him?
What's a work-related accident that still haunts you to this day? While building Levi Stadium, a trucker was unloading rebar, long thin metal rods, when the entire pile fell on him, impaling him multiple times and also crushing him. I never met the man, but his cat and elderly dog ended up at a local shelter. We planned to adopt the dog and ended up taking home the cat too because we didn't want to split them. Nina, the dog, passed away in her sleep in 2017, about 2 years after we brought her home. Seal, the cat, is around 7 years old now and doing just fine. I've always wondered if they ever thought of him. Work in a dealership, and once a tech was using a tool that broke free, bashing him in the face, knocking out multiple teeth, splitting his lip and breaking his nose. It was a bloody mess. Young kid, with balls of steel apparently. While waiting for an ambulance, he was sitting there talking and smiled to show the damage. That smile was horrifying. He recovered and got a ton of dental work and still works there. Trench collapse. Guy was pinned mid-chest. Not good but not immediately fatal. Guy's coworkers freak out and use the digger to dig him out. Ended up catching him with the teeth on the bucket. Essentially cut him in half. The guy on the digger was his brother. Dude would have probably been alright had they rescued him the right way. I think it was the day before Thanksgiving 2012. There was a news story about a guy trying to reach something off of a platform at a local paper mill. He fell into a nearly boiling hot tank of caustic solution with spinning blades in it. There was absolutely nothing left. I have worked over those exact tanks numerous times. It's an old facility, but if you don't follow their safety policies right down to the T, they will throw you out in a heartbeat. I can see why. My husband got rid of my cat to someone who won't give him back. First, I filed a police report. I collected as much proof of ownership as possible. Then I reached out to the coworker's wife and explained what was going on, and promptly asked them to return Benji. She then informed me that she had no idea what I was talking about. At this point I was furious with rage. I asked my husband what the hell was going on. Told him I have police involved and he needs to give up the cat ASAP. Turns out Benji was at a local shelter. Never was with the coworker at all. I immediately tracked the shelter down to retrieve my boy. I had all my documents needed to prove he is mine, and he has a microchip. I took him straight to my sister's house, where I will also be staying for the time being. My sister has been through divorce and has remarried, so she will help me get all my ducks in a row and prepare to file for divorce. I am heartbroken, but also incredibly thankful that my poor boy is now home safe. He was clearly stressed and confused, but he is settling in quite well at my sister's. My brother will be picking up any necessities from my house for me. I haven't been home or seen my husband since I left for the shelter. My family has supported me in my decisions and they are all willing to do whatever it takes to help me when I may need them.
Hey shy people, what is your worst experience? I don't talk much in class, and I interact with only a few people. Some of my classmates just thought I hate them, and cropped me out of their end-of-year class photos which they then posted on Instagram. I don't really care about their posts, I just felt really hurt they cropped me out. I went to this summer camp at a history museum around 4th grade. The second day they sprung on us that we would have to create a short play about a notable figure of our choice. I'm already terrified and I make it worse by choosing to do mine on Kylon, the dude who invented paper. The play ended up being a 30 seconds monologue that was basically a condensed biography with me wearing these musty silk robes. After I slunk back to my seat, I realized that everyone else did like actual plays with dialogue and plots and stuff. So embarrassing. I was in elementary and took a bus home each day. I missed my stop and I was so terribly shy and quiet the bus driver didn't hear me. He went on to pick up high school students and didn't notice I was still on the bus. The high school students were so sweet and kind. They alerted the bus driver and he took me home. My mom was freaking out by the time I got home.
What conversations have you overheard in a language they assumed you don't know? A few years back, I went to a big shopping mall to purchase some saris. My purchase of saris usually does not take more than 15 minutes. Before leaving the house, I had already decided about the color, fabric and price range that I was looking for. As usual I asked, in Telugu, show me Bengal cotton saris in the price range of 600 to 800 rupees in cream color and lemon yellow color. The salesman at the counter went to pick the saris from the rack that was in the store. That's when a girl, who seemed to be the leader of the saris section, called that salesman and in English, told him there is unsold stock bought 2 years back, lying in the go-down. This lady will not know the difference. Bring them. The guy looked at me. There was a suppressed sneer on his face. She was careful not to use the phrase old stock. Me being an old lady wearing a simple cotton sari might have made her assume that I didn't know English. Today I have a lot of time. Let me enjoy the scene, I thought to myself. She then told me in Telugu that there was new stock that just arrived in the morning, lying in the go-down and asked me to wait. I asked for a chair and settled myself comfortably. After 15 minutes, the salesman arrived with a big bundle of saris and started showing each of them to me. I told him that I wanted cream-colored saris and lemon yellow-colored saris, to which he showed me some saris. I rejected them, citing that cream should be little lighter and lemon yellow should be a bit darker. Bring more saris from the same stock, said the chief to the salesman in English. The salesman went inside and brought more saris. I patiently inspected and rejected every sari that he brought. This happened thrice. Meanwhile, I felt sorry for the guy. But I could not forget his suppressed laughter. Throughout the process, he was communicating with the chief with a conspiring look in his eyes. After 1.5 hours, I got exhausted, could not enjoy the scene anymore. I am tired of seeing this old stock of yours. Please inform me when new stock arrives, I said in English. The girl stood flabbergasted. I walked out of the shop. And never returned. Update 4, my husband refused to let me leave yesterday, then threatened to take my life. What a crazy week. There were many moments I wanted to give up, throw in the towel and go back to life with my husband. I decided to stay strong, celebrate the small wins I made for my kids and I, and ultimately hand every bit of evidence over to the police, CPS and detectives. My husband was arrested yesterday for stalking. The kids and I have a 61-day protective order. My husband has to wear a GPS monitor. He was arrested at work in front of everyone, which absolutely humiliated him, I have zero doubt. Of course he's telling everyone I'm crazy, doesn't even matter to me right now. I'm back home. Super yay, my son got to go back to school, my little two are so much happier and I have a pantry and a fridge full of food, plenty of diapers and more clothes than I had before because I asked for help. I didn't play the victim like he said I am. I just told the truth, took care of myself and the kids and celebrated the small moments of happiness. My husband is telling the police I'm bipolar, I physically mistreated him, I was stalking him, kind of ironic. He also stated that I set up booby traps and planned this and that I only did all this because I was on my menstrual cycle. What an absolute worthless, pathetic dirtbag. This has been so insane and I keep telling myself he did this, not me. He gave me no choice. A quote that's helped me a ton right now is women are not rehabilitation centers for broken men.
Am I the a-hole for leaving my boyfriend behind when we got attacked by a bear? I feel like my boyfriend is acting ignorant and dramatic about this whole situation, but maybe I need to step back and get a different perspective. I'm 28 years old, and I'm really into the outdoors, especially hiking. I have been an avid hiker for years, and I've traveled to perform certain hikes as well as camping along extended hiking trails. For example, last year I spent a month hiking the Appalachian Trail. Even though it was lonely and challenging, it was one of my favorite hiking trips I've ever taken. Anyway, I have been dating my current boyfriend for about 7 months. He is about 6 years older than me and not a huge nature person. Even though he doesn't have lots of outdoor hobbies like me, I fell for my boyfriend's charismatic personality and good sense of humor. My boyfriend was always really interested in my own hobbies. He has come with me on a couple of hikes, but honestly, he just slows me down. I've never told him that thought, and whenever he asks to come along on a hike I just agree. The problem started last weekend. I had a long hike planned about an hour away. I really just wanted to go by myself. It was going to be a demanding hike, and I knew my boyfriend probably couldn't handle it. Boy, did I turn out to be right. In a way. Well, my boyfriend ended up globbing onto my plans, and I was already annoyed when I found myself driving an hour to the trail with him in the passenger seat. Before we left, I tried to warn him that the trail was long and full of wildlife. I said it might not be safe for a beginner hiker, but all he said was that he could handle any trail that I could. Fine, whatever, I knew he would probably regret it, but it's not like I could kick him out of my car. Either way, my husband and I were about halfway into the trail. It was the middle of the day during the week, so we hadn't seen any other hikers on the trail the entire time we were on it. I thought it would be just another normal day of hiking before we turned a corner and heard a large rustling noise right behind us. It all felt like it happened in a split second. My husband and I turned around and laid our eyes on a giant grizzly bear. It was truly one of the most horrifying moments of my life. The grizzly towered over us, and I saw my life flash before my eyes. Yet, like I said, I'm no stranger to the outdoors, so I know what to do when encountering all different species of bears. So even though I was terrified for my life, I dropped into a ball on the ground and shielded my eyes and ears, playing dead. I didn't have an extra moment to tell my boyfriend the correct thing to do, and I just laid there curled up in a ball, hoping he had the sense to copy me. I felt the ground vibrate and I opened my eyes slightly to see no sign of my boyfriend or the bear. I laid there for another second before getting up and running away, exiting the forest from the end of the trail. When I got out of the trail, I went to the park ranger's office and told them what happened. They were helpful, and they took me in their truck to go find my boyfriend. After driving up the trail for about a half hour, we finally found my boyfriend hiding in an old abandoned ranger shack. He looked visibly traumatized, and he didn't hug me back when we found him. We went to the hospital afterward, and I thought he was just being silent out of shock until we finally left the hospital together. The moment I put him in my car, he started screaming at me for abandoning him to die. He called me a cold bitch and said I obviously didn't care about him since I left him alone to die and I didn't even try to save him. I was shocked and confused. Did he really expect me to fight off a grizzly for him? I reminded him that I told him the trail might be too challenging for him, and all I was doing was following hiking safety tactics. He just kept yelling, calling me effed up I was and how I needed to make up all this up to him somehow. Honestly, this whole mess is making me see my boyfriend in a new light, and I'm thinking about leaving him after seeing his reaction in an emergency. My absent father demanded I invite my bully stepsister to my wedding or he will not attend. I told him he's not welcome anymore in my wedding and my life. My father remarried when I was 14, his wife Mary and his stepdaughter Kyla were hell in my life. My father is wealthy, so we used to go to a fancy school. Kyla was very mean to me and I had a hard time to the point that I had to move to another school because I couldn't take it anymore. Once she convinced my father and Mary that I was pregnant, it was so embarrassing because I was still a virgin, and yet, she and Mary convinced my father that I should do a pregnancy test. After it came negative, she told some of her friends at school that I had baby garbage. The bullying was nonstop. She would do anything to make my life miserable. Once she paid one guy at school to start a rumor that I did a BJ on him during class. When I was already going to another school, she told everybody at my old school that I left because I was caught stealing at the mall and I was in a youth detention center. My father knows this and he used to say this is what having a sister looks like, you just have to prank her harder. He used to treat it like some stupid kid's fight. I had to go to therapy after because I was tormented about everything. My parents had split custody, so I used to spend 1 week with my father and 1 with my mom. After 2 years of hell, I told my father that I wouldn't stay at his place anymore and our relationship was reduced to 2 weekends a month. Then my relationship with my father was non-existent during my college days. He would send me money and call me once every month and that was it. I started dating my fiancé Louis 4 years ago and I only introduced him to my father after more than 2 years of relationship. I'm getting married this spring and we are going to marry at the beach in another country in Europe. Both families are wealthy and we decided to offer a stay at the hotel to our guests and they'll pay only for their tickets. Because of that, we decided to settle on a small number of guests, around 80, and of course, Kyla is not one of them. The wedding plan started 3 months ago and my father knew that I wasn't going to invite Kyla, however, he flipped out now and said that I needed to invite her. His argument now is Kyla is a different person today and we should give her a chance. I said that I was not going to invite a person that I don't have one single good memory to such a big day. We have been fighting about that since then. This last week he told me that I shouldn't count on his money if Kyla isn't invited and my mom said, fine, I'll pay for everything then. After that, he said that he was not coming to the wedding without Kyla and I replied fine. It's not like it's the first time that you chose her over me. I am uninviting you not only on my wedding but on my life. Then blocked him on everything. The haunting of the Grimace Shake. In the quiet town of Crestwood, a chilling legend emerged, surrounding a cursed beverage known as the Grimace Shake. Its enigmatic purple elixir held a malevolent power, luring unsuspecting souls into a realm of terror. Amidst the whispers and warnings, a group of friends, enticed by curiosity, embarked on a perilous journey to taste the forbidden drink. Little did they know that their decision would lead them down a path of unspeakable horror. As they gathered at the abandoned Oakwood Asylum, an eerie atmosphere engulfed them. The Grimace Shake, with its sinister reputation, sat ominously in the center, emanating an otherworldly aura. With trembling hands, they raised their cups and took their first, fateful sips. Instantly, the world warped before their eyes. The walls of the asylum crumbled, revealing a nightmarish landscape, a twisted reflection of their own fears. A ghostly figure, clad in purple, emerged from the shadows, his features distorted into a wicked grin, the embodiment of the Grimace Shake's curse. Haunted by their own nightmares, the friends found themselves trapped in a labyrinth of torment. Each step they took echoed through the desolate halls, resounding with their mounting dread. Visions of their deepest fears taunted them at every turn, blurring the line between reality and hallucination. One by one, they succumbed to the Grimace Shake's malefic influence. As the cursed elixir coursed through their veins, their bodies convulsed in agonizing pain. They choked on its putrid taste, purple liquid spraying in a grotesque display of their torment. Their screams pierced the night, blending with the haunting echoes that permeated the asylum. The Grimace Shake had claimed their souls, forever binding them to its dark power. The haunting of Grimace Shake became a chilling tale etched into Crestwood's history, a cautionary reminder of the consequences that awaited those who dared to indulge in forbidden pleasures. The cursed beverage in the asylum stood as haunting remnants, forever intertwined in a sinister dance of death and despair, waiting for the next unsuspecting souls to fall victim to their malevolence.
I fell for an escort. What do I do now? I am an electric wheelchair user. She, 23F, was one of those local college girls turned escort so she could pay for her education and lives locally. My first session with her was in mid-March. First thing I did when she came over gave her a hug, then I fondled her tits. She looked weirded out and turned away. I asked what was wrong, and she said she's not used to this. I asked if it was the wheelchair. She said no, it was the cuddles, and that she loves to cuddle and no other clients or former boyfriends ever wanted to cuddle. We had a longer session than intended, and spent an extra hour talking about how we each got into our situations. Many subjects an escort would not have talked about, like children, along with basic stuff such as hobbies etc. I offered to pay extra but she refused, so after the first session I assumed it was because of pity that she did not take the money for an entire extra session's worth of time. Second session she brought some toys because I had a hard time finishing the previous time. We cuddled before and after and I ate her out until she came. Again an extra session's worth and she refused to take the extra money. She could just as easily ask for money like the first time. She then showed me some pictures from Coachella and said you should go someday, and when I explained how difficult it is for me, and how I have no one to go to, she said maybe one day we could go together. She also showed me a picture of the trading card aisle at Target she went to when in California, after I mentioned my hobby to her, and how she told her cousin about it and he wanted to visit the trading card shop one day, and she even showed me one of his cards. Fast forward a week later she gets sick, so the weekend after, I take her out to dinner instead because she was tired. We went to dinner and she only wanted me to pay for the food itself, and not the usual money for a session plus the food. First thing she did when she started talking to me was sit down was asked how my dog and parents were. We spent 3 hours just talking, about family, careers choices, future goals. She told me about her family background and how she was a militantly kid who never stayed in one place and was really starting to like the area. She even told me her best friend's name. A few minutes after she came back from the bathroom, I mentioned how women are difficult for me because they see the wheelchair and nothing else. She said she did not mind. I replied with well, this situation is different and she sighed and turned her head down to the left as if she was sad. The dinner date ends, I let her take the leftovers, walk her to her car. She said she had an amazing time just talking and I told her to be my guest. She smiled and hugged me and said sure, then went into her car with a look on her face as if she was sad and conflicted, looking down to the side again like she unintentionally felt something too and was sad that she had to let go. 2 weeks later she ghosted me twice due to family issues, and I'm here wondering why would she ghosted a client unless she got confused too, and does she not need the money either way? A week passes and I realized this whole situation was weird and left her a message saying I felt something was off with the whole thing and that we should call it off because this is clearly not a normal escort/client situation anymore and we'll both get hurt. In her text back, she acted confused and said we were still good, etc. Did not hear from her for around a month after that. I was going through personal issues and wanted to spend a relaxing evening with her back to square one. She replied a week later giving me her condolences about my situation and how she was having trouble with her new apartment and was moving away. At this point I'm telling myself this is not normal and I should ignore her, but my emotional stress caused me to send her paragraphs of questions and asking her what exactly happened over several weeks, which I know is wrong and not healthy. The last thing I asked her is if she'd ever see me again. After I had a ton of paranoia and depression due to unforeseen circumstances, she said she'd let me know when she'd be back in the area. She never got back. I'm in the process of trying to figure out what this whole thing was. Go to the next part. Update: I fell for an escort. What do I do now? I saw her the next month, and she seemed to have some trouble walking, and was wearing super baggy clothes despite the fact that it was midwinter. I asked her if we could talk, and although she was hesitant, eventually we went out to a bar to get a couple drinks. So I drove us to the ABR, and as soon as we got seated the waiter asked us what we wanted. I said 2 martinis because I remember that's what she wanted. However, to my surprise she said I don't drink anymore. I was a bit surprised by the comment, but I moved past it. I asked her, so how's it been lately? She responded, I haven't been able to do much business for the past 4 months, so I've been living with my parents, so that I can continue to afford college. She went on about how her life has been so terribly recently because she can't work, and she looked at me as if she was expecting an apology. I went the rest of the day small-talking her, but I was secretly trying to figure out what had happened. She said she had to go and she seemed particularly annoyed, so as I was walking to her car, I finally cracked and asked her why she was ignoring me, and she seemed kinda shocked. Then she said it. She said that she was pregnant with my child, and she couldn't bring herself to face me. I felt like vomiting then and there. I didn't know what to do, considering I thought to myself that I was infertile. Now it's all starting to make sense why she seemed so unstable and why she wasn't drinking. I had also put her completely out of work, and it was probably greatly affecting her grades. I have just bought all the books in existence about being a dad, but I still feel so unprepared and not ready, especially considering that I might be in a wheelchair for at least the next 5 years. I got my escort pregnant and now I don't know what to do. Have you ever had a bad gut feeling about somebody and it was right? When I was younger, I had a strong dislike for my mom's best friend Judy and her family. I couldn't stand them. I was the type who'd fit in with any group, lots of experience in switching schools at early grades. But I did not like that family. My mom, on the other hand, adored them. She was always forcing me to accompany her to visit. I'd do everything in my power to weasel out of it, beg and plead to stay home. But mom was determined that I'd be best friends with the kids, and she was always off running around with Judy. I learned to tolerate the youngest girl, and avoided the rest. They gave me the willies. There was something hard under the surface of the whole family I couldn't ignore. The girls were obsessed with horses and horse shows. The boy with firearms, and he seemed pretty brutal with the pets. The dad played rough, and there was something coarse and harsh about him that made me find a reason to be elsewhere when he was around. Something about the way he roughhoused with the girls didn't seem right. Thankfully they moved 10 miles away the next year and got shifted to a different school, and I wasn't saddled with them after 7th grade. Mom's friendship was long distance after that, and I could find reasons to not go along for the trips. But she still was off with Judy every chance she could be. Fast forward about 15 years, a news story hits the local news about a crime to the south of us. Some poor farmhand was killed trying to stop a thief stealing a brand new pickup, horse trailer, and a horse. This isn't the Wild West anymore, so this type of crime got people's attention. No suspects mentioned. The story faded and was forgotten when nothing that was stolen was found. A few months later, 300 miles to the east of us, 3 men were killed in another attempted robbery. However, this time they found the culprit, and you guessed it, it was Judy and her crazy family. Almost Judy's whole darn family were arrested on multiple charges. By the time the entire story was unraveled in court, I knew why I'd had an instinctive negative reaction to them. I won't detail it, but let's say abuse, weird religious cults, Alabama love and more was brought to light. My reaction, especially to the dad, was really spot on. What blew my mind? My mother spent the entire trial saying it can't be true. I don't believe it at all, not Judy's kids. They are such nice people. When did you realize you were the villain in someone else's story? There was this guy Bob. He was a really nice guy, could have been the lead in your typical teen coming-of-age type movie. A lot of my friends were friends with him, but me and Bob, we were never friends, because Bob hated me. He didn't hate me at first. It was just a series of unfortunate events. It started in junior high. We both went out for the cross-country team. He was good, but I was better. I didn't hardly notice the guy. It wasn't like I was out to get him, but I was always just that much faster than him. Back then, it was the top 7 racers from each school that got to compete in the big multi-school races. I was number 7. Bob was number 8. Bob and I were about the same size. This is important because we both also went out for the wrestling team. In each weight class only 2 people got to compete at the meets. There was another guy who was a good, experienced wrestler. Neither of us had a chance against him. That left me and Bob fighting for that second slot. And I was a better wrestler than Bob. It wasn't that I was great or anything. I did okay, won a few more than I lost, but I was just better enough that poor Bob never beat me. It wasn't just sports though, and really, I wasn't very good at sports. I was a big nerd though, and while most people don't want to be nerds, nerds don't mind being big nerds. In my school, I was known as the computer guy. Bob also loved computers. There was a computer club and we'd try to write crappy little programs in whatever the basic language was that ran on the Apple computers we had in the labs. None of us really knew anything, but I was always 2 steps ahead of Bob. The thing was, Bob and I were very much alike. That's why I liked him. We had very similar interests, and while I'm not great at anything, I was just always slightly better at him at literally everything we ever objectively competed in. By 8th grade, he'd given me the cold shoulder. He was never mean to me, but he was always distant and just generally seemed like he didn't like me. I might not ever have put it all together though. I never thought about him and me competing with each other. Until the 8th grade winter dance. I had a crush on a girl. I was socially awkward, and I awkwardly asked her to the dance. I actually asked her if anyone had asked her yet, and she said, one guy, but she didn't think she wanted to say yes to him. I asked her, and she said yes. Junior high romance. I didn't think much of it. We went to the dance, had a good time, and then dated for like 3 weeks. As it turns out, Bob was her good friend and Bob had a crush on her. Bob was the one who asked her to the dance, but she saw him as a friend. She told me that Bob basically hated me and complained about me all the time. She didn't really know who I was, until Bob started telling her how awful I was. Poor Bob. Once she said it to me, it all made sense. I'd hate being one-upped constantly by some guy who was just like me, only slightly better at stuff. Nobody would like that, and then I swoop in, steal his date and then I end up dating his crush. I felt bad, but I also didn't know how to tell him I was sorry. Also, I wasn't really sorry for my actions. I didn't do anything wrong, just sorry that my existence seemed to make his life worse. I tried my best to give him space after that, but obviously, easier said than done. Our final interaction came after 8th grade. It was the summer before high school. My older sister was running in some 10K race and my mom woke me up at 5:30 a.m. and told me I should go. I didn't train, I wasn't ready, I didn't even know it was a 10K. Our CC races in junior high were only 1.5 miles, not 6.2, still, whatever, I agree. I go to the race and I do pretty darn well. It was the furthest I'd ever run, and my pace really dropped towards the end, but I did it. I finished. I averaged 7:01 per mile and was really proud. At the end, they had a little award ceremony thing and I was shocked to hear my name called. The race had different age groups and I'd taken first place. In fact, there were only 2 people in the under 14 group, me and Bob. I had no idea, but here I was, taking the first place medal from poor Bob. He finished 15 seconds after me. I swear, when he looked at me on that stage, I saw absolute hate in his eyes. I felt awful. Bob and I went to different high schools and thankfully, I haven't run into him since. I stopped running, but I wrestled in high school and I always hoped that him and I would face off again and he'd beat me, and that would be his happy ending. My horrific stepmother laid hands on my child. My stepmother is a wannabe party planner. She has taken it upon herself to plan and host every party and holiday my dad's family has thrown since she married him. I never loved those occasions growing up. She's controlling and gets upset if people complain about anything, but humored her for my dad's sake. According to him, this helps her feel included. I'm getting married to my fiancée Jane in July. We got engaged in early 2021, but Jane ended up getting pregnant a couple months after that, and we decided to postpone the wedding to focus on our son for a while. So we've had a long engagement. My stepmother has tried to hijack our wedding plans from day one, complaining, contacting our planner, showing up unannounced to Jane's dress appointments, etc., and we have repeatedly asked her to stop. Dad wants us to humor her, but she's clearly resentful of the fact that she's not hosting the wedding or being labeled mother of the groom in invitations. Besides our baby boy, we also have Luke, Jane's paternal half-brother. She got custody of him a few months into our relationship, after his parents died. I ended up moving in with them during the pandemic, and have been in Luke's life since he was a baby. He doesn't call me dad, and refers to us as his sister and his sister's friend, but we love him like a son. Stepmother, though, hates Luke. She accuses Jane of baby trapping her way into the family. That accusation only got worse after our son was born. My dad gets along with Jane and adores the kids, but stepmother demands him to refuse babysitting Luke, so we don't leave the kids with them often. Instead, Jane's brother and sister-in-law usually watch the kids for us, as their children are close to ours in age. We had a thing last Sunday, and my brother-in-law was out of town with his family. Jane's other siblings live in different cities, as well as my mom and sister. My dad agreed to babysit at our place, and we left. We came back to find both kids crying, stepmother screaming, and dad weakly trying to calm everyone down. Apparently, Luke had told stepmother that both he and our son were going to be our ring bearers, and she went ballistic. She screamed that she wasn't going to allow that because he wasn't family. She then made me need to include the trigger warning when he started crying. His lip is still split. She'd never gotten to this point before. We immediately banned her from our house and from our wedding. Dad is fuming and has said he's not going without her. He's also convinced half of his side of the family, by severely downplaying what stepmother did, to boycott the wedding as well. This includes my stepbrother, who fully agrees with his mother no matter how many times I try to tell him the truth. Me and Jane are refusing to budge, but many of my cousins who aren't coming anymore are asking us to reconsider. Pretty much all of Jane's family agrees with us, but one of her aunts has suggested that maybe stepmother is acting out because she doesn't feel welcomed by my family. I've honestly had it with my family enabling her behavior. I love my dad, and really want him at my wedding, but I am more than willing to go no contact if it means protecting my family. We did press charges. We took Luke to the pediatrician the next day and gathered every piece of evidence we had. Not only did we have pictures of Luke's face, but by some miraculous strike of luck, we also had nanny cam footage. When did a false accusation backfire on the accuser? One of my buddies worked as a crystal grower for a photovoltaic industry company that manufactured silicon photovoltaic panels, which are used for converting sunlight to electricity. The company was a recently created fledgling subdivision of one of the largest petroleum companies in the world. Crystal growing is both an art and a skill, and my buddy had what it took to sit there for 12 hours straight watching the single small silicon seed crystal slowly grow to form a long, large diameter ingot of the correct diameter of about 5 inches, 13 centimeters, from a pool of white-hot molten silicon, as he skillfully withdrew it by remote control from the pool of molten material, constantly adjusting the slow rate of of withdrawal of the ingot from the slowly rotating crucible of molten silicon while the ingot slowly rotated in the opposite direction. Viewing was through a special dark glass window into the white-hot electric furnace interior. The art and skill involved watching the ingot to maintain its diameter, as well as watching in case it became polycrystalline. For a photovoltaic cell to work, each cell must be one giant crystal, so multiple crystal ingots are worthless for making photovoltaic cells, and difficult to recognize when more crystals began to form. My buddy had the knack for recognizing when this happened, and when it did, he halted operations so no time was wasted in shutting down the process and starting over from a tiny seed crystal suspended from a long slender tungsten metal rod. Each silicon growing machine setup was in a clean booth that had its own filtered air conditioned environment with a toilet, hand washing facilities, and a place to eat because the crystal grower could not leave the operation unattended for more than a few minutes in case something went wrong. One morning my buddy showed up for work, and his building access card didn't work in the door lock. He called security on the phone and was escorted inside and was told his employment was terminated for intimate harassment of 2 young women employees. He was allowed a hearing in front of the human resources director for the company, so he took it and made an appointment. The case against him was leering and making intimacy suggestive comments on such and such days at such and such times with signed statements from witnesses. My buddy had no evidence to refute any of this other than denying he did it, so he put his tail between his legs, cleared out his locker, and went home, totally puzzled, plus had a black mark on his employment record that would make it difficult to ever get a good job again. But my buddy's landlord was by no means puzzled, and took matters into his own hands to help out by calling his land shark lawyer, who took cases like this on a contingency basis, since a rat was smelled, actually 2 big mean female rats. This was in about 1985 when both workplace intimate harassment cases were at an all-time high and contingency lawyers were raking in billions all across the United States. So, Mr. Landshark, Esquire, interviewed the former crystal grower to get basic information, and filed lawsuits against the company and the parent oil company for wrongful termination, and got court orders to identify who the people were who made the complaints against my buddy, and who the witnesses were, and what the evidence was. Other court orders were issued for all employee schedules, work hours, time clock records, surveillance records, and security log books of who came and went. To make a long story happy, my buddy and other low-level employees did not know that the crystal growing booths had video cameras in them with timestamps on the recordings, on the dates and times of day given on the complaints of intimacy harassment against my buddy, and verified by witnesses. He was on videotape his entire 12-hour shifts, never leaving the booth. My buddy's elderly mom and dad suddenly sold their house and moved out of the area, and my buddy fixed up his 1961 Ford F-150 pickup truck like new and got a new Honda Quadra track off-road vehicle. I found out later that his mom and dad were living on a faraway 40-acre ranch way out in the boondocks where land cost a lot and the weather was nice, and the 2 women did jail time. So, the land shark must have negotiated quite a deal. My buddy of course turned down going back to work where he was wrongfully terminated from, but to his credit, he went and found another job simply because he enjoys working. Has anyone ever been unalived at your job? Worked at a zoo. Happened after I had left for the day, but one of the elephant keepers got crushed to death. We were one of the few zoos that were allowed by the OZA to have free contact with the female elephants. In other words, the keepers could be in the exhibit with them to clean, do training, or whatnot. Anyway, they were walking one of the females back into the barn at the end of the day, one keeper in front and one in behind just like they always do. They think something spooked the elephant, but she rammed her head into the keeper in front, smashing her into one of the metal barricades. She made it to the hospital, but passed away shortly thereafter from massive internal bleeding. One of the guys I worked with was still at work when it happened and rushed to the barn when they announced the emergency over the radio. He said he knew she was gone the moment he saw her. Things were rough in the time after that. 2 brothers were in charge of the elephants, one is the curator and the other the lead keeper. They had both worked with elephants for a very long time and were extremely passionate about what they did and spent countless hours in their conservation efforts. They treated those elephants like their family. The brother that was the lead keeper was the other keeper walking behind the elephant. He quit not long after and no longer works with animals. The curator left a couple years later. They said that the elephant knew that she had done something wrong and acted upset for a time afterward. Just a sad story all around. My friend set me up with my girlfriend as a joke, they've all slept with her before. I've, 22, been with my girlfriend, 22, for 4 years now, and it's been the greatest 4 years of my life. She's the sweetest person I've ever met. She's hilarious, insanely creative, she's an artist, goofy and just the happiest girl you'll ever meet. She's always smiling and very outgoing. She's so energized and I'll admit it's sometimes hard to catch up with all her adventures. But wow, it's been so amazing being with her. My friends introduced me to her this summer. We all graduated high school, and we immediately bonded. We're both into comics, anime, Marvel and DC, Dungeons and Dragons. We had so much in common, we just became super close very quickly. The fact we had so much in common made it easy for us to spend time together, going to conventions, anime events, game tournaments, superhero films. This all of course led to us officially becoming a couple, and the rest is history. My parents also are in love with her, which is honestly the cherry on top. It's nice to see my parents be so welcoming towards my girlfriend, although they've gotten a little protective towards her like parents. I plan to propose to my girlfriend later this year, as we always joke about getting married, having a weird geeky wedding and starting a family, and I really want that so much, so proposing to her is my main goal. Fingers crossed she says yes. I really hope so. Now this is where my friends come in. I have 3 close friends of mine, friends I grew up with since elementary. We all split up a few months after high school, they left to another city for college, so right now we all either just talk through Zoom chat or I go visit them once in a while. I decided to stay in the city I'm in, be close to family and my girlfriend. Well, I told my friends that I plan to propose to my girlfriend, that I'm 100% ready to start a family with her and how excited I am to see how it goes. They kept asking if it was serious, even calling me dumb. They really were going at it with me, quite roughly. I just figured they hated the idea of marriage, so I ignored their comments. That's when they told me the truth, and holy crap, the proof, they had made it even worse. They all said they met my girlfriend 8 years ago at midnight bowling. They met her through a friend of theirs that invited her that night. I don't know this other friend at all, so I can't say who it is. That's how they all met. They thought she was hot and cool, so they stayed in contact with her. After that, my friends still continued hanging out with my girlfriend, smoking Zaza, playing video games, anime, and of course, intimacy. They told me they'll pass her around the group for fun, and that's practically why they were friends with her. They kept using the S word, which crawled into my skin in such a negative way. So pretty much they just kept my girlfriend around for lovemaking. All 3 of my close friends have slept with her plenty of times. This lasted a good portion of high school, but of course I didn't know my girlfriend at this time because she attended another high school. They decided they'll introduce her to me because they wanted to see if I can also get lucky, that it was all a joke to see if I can also end up making love with her. I didn't believe any of it, but my heart completely shattered when they showed proof from Instagram messages. It was nothing inappropriate like pics or anything. They just showed me that they all indeed kept in contact with her in the past. And you know what they did? They made me the dumb guy and made all this a joke. They said I'm dumb for dating her, that I should have known better. They didn't expect me to date her at all, that my girlfriend was going to act promiscuous towards, but they were surprised she didn't. How the hell am I supposed to have known better? Friends introducing friends to a boy or girl is a normal thing. That's how I interpreted all of this. Also, I had no idea about their history with my girlfriend, so them saying, I should have known better, is ridiculous. I didn't see my girlfriend as an object like them. I saw her a friend that I ended up falling in love with. She treated me very kindly, comforted me whenever I was sad, told me how much she loved me. We fell for each other. It wasn't just intimacy. The only reason my friends told me this was because they think me getting married to her is too far, so they expected me knowing the truth would lead to me dumping her. She's too much of a promiscuous woman, man. Just let her go, one of my friends said. I just got off the chat, and they've been sending me non-stop texts ever since. I haven't replied. I don't feel like talking to my friends at the moment. I did peek at a few messages out of curiosity, and instead of apologies, I just got a lot of "dude, get checked bro. You might have caught something." It wasn't even serious, it was in a jokey manner, which is annoying. I approached my girlfriend about this, as polite as humanly possible, and I instantly regretted it. She broke down completely, which I'll admit kinda teared me up. I've never seen her panic so much. She was freaking out as if someone died. She kept apologizing, telling me she's never slept with anyone else while with me, and said she didn't know about the joke my friends were doing. She told me my friends simply invited her to hang out, and during the hangout they introduced her to me. That's how it all went. She says she wasn't aware of a plan or anything. You probably think I'm a S word, right? Is what she kept saying, which just hurt me to hear. She told me she loved me, that to please just ignore my friends to not break up with her. I just told her I loved her as well, and that what I know doesn't change my feelings towards her. She still thinks I'm going to break up with her, which I won't ever do. I just kept her in my arms, that's all I could do. I didn't want her panicking, so I just comforted her. I've been with this incredible girl for 4 years, created beautiful memories with her, and I'm not going to let what my friends have said to me ruin what I have with her. The reason why my girlfriend didn't tell me earlier was because she cherished our relationship the moment we met. She didn't want to hurt me, and I understand completely. She says I treated her kindly, like a human being, and she appreciated that. We connected because of our similarities, and she felt more comfortable with me compared to my friends. She was afraid if I knew the truth, I wouldn't have considered being with her in the first place. My girlfriend thought I was going to think of her as a S word, which I absolutely would never have done. It was obvious she felt guilty, but I told her she didn't do anything wrong, that her past was her business, and that I still love her very much. I'm not mad at my girlfriend. Why should I be mad? She didn't do anything wrong. Her past is her past, and it's none of my business. Who she sleeps with is none of my concern. My feelings towards her haven't changed. I love her with all my heart, I always will. I'm mad at my so-called friends, because one being they're taking all of this as a joke, speaking of my girlfriend awfully, and the other being that this all started as a little joke between them. They didn't have good intentions when they introduced me to my girlfriend. They simply passed her to me thinking I was going to treat her like a toy or a piece of meat. I'm just shocked, that's what I am. This whole thing has been mentally stressing me out, and I wish I didn't know about it. I love my girlfriend, but I'll admit the thought of her with my friends hurts me. I've cut all contact with my friends these past couple of days. I've been ignoring their calls and texts, and there's a ton of them. I just don't know what to do, I really don't. Also, the thought of my girlfriend immediately making love with my friends kinda bugs me, because me and her took it slow. Maybe she did care about me compared to my friends, and didn't want to hop straight into intimacy. I also think this because even my friends said she didn't act promiscuous towards me, that she actually cared about me. You see, these are the stupid thoughts I'm getting in my head, and I hate it. I'm personally still going to propose to my girlfriend. I'm not leaving her. I plan to cut contact with my friends and simply focus on my future. If any of you have any advice to share, I'll greatly appreciate it. I definitely need to relax my mind, that's for sure. When did you realize that something was off with your kid? David was precocious at 3. By 5, he was reading at a 6th grade level, and began to understand the basics of algebra. He was an intelligent and personable child. Every parent's dream. There was one peculiarity with him. One that I still can't explain. David had an imaginary friend from the first moment he could communicate with us. We didn't discourage this, because so many children have imaginary friends. As a child, I did, but mine stopped visiting when I was around 8. The peculiar part of this comes from some disquieting events that occurred at intervals between his childhood and when he left for university. When he was around 12, and still hadn't abandoned his friend, I asked him to tell me about him. The answers I received were a little on the troubling side, but I chalked them up to an overactive imagination. David basically told me that he didn't have the same friends as when he was a toddler. The friends changed over time, and in some instances there were groups of people who he would interact with in what he called the group. Sometimes the friends would come back to visit and many he would never encounter again. We discussed the matter, and he told me that one of his friends, whom he called Paul, told him that he should never really discuss his visitors with anyone as he would be laughed at and not believed. I asked him what else Paul had told him. He shrugged, and told me in some detail that, as a boy, Paul had witnessed a Civil War battle and that Paul's uncle had fought in the battle. So, I'm starting to believe that this is just his imagination, until he said something that made me reconsider. David looked at me, and said, "You really do look like Paul." He said he was your great-great-grandfather. I quizzed him some more, and he told me quite a bit about Paul, and the battle he had witnessed. Paul, it seems, had lost an arm in a farm accident some years later, but had a large family and lived to the ripe old age of 103. What I was told was intriguing, and looking my son in the face, I could detect no sign of artifice or guile. It was clear that he believed everything he was telling me. For some time he told me about his visitors in the group, and how they were so very interested in speaking with him. This played through my mind for some time, but, as I believed it to be a flight of imagination, it wasn't really troubling. David functioned normally, was promoted into advanced classes in school, and had the usual number of friends. In all aspects, his life was normal and healthy. A few years had passed, and my niece had become heavily involved in Ancestry.com. She had traced our family lineage through several branches as far back as the 15th century. It was really quite interesting, and she included me on her account, so I could read her research notes and family tree information. I had looked at our family history after David told me about Paul, but had no luck. One afternoon, I looked back on my maternal grandfather's branch, and discovered that his grandfather was named Paul. I called my niece and asked her if she had any information on him. She provided his date of birth and where he had lived, the number of children he had, and more. It was spot on with the information David had given me about his friend, Paul. The number of children, Paul's wife's name. All of it was exactly as I had been told. When David came home from school, I asked him about Paul, and he replied that they hadn't spoken in a while, but that the man showed up occasionally to check in on how the family was doing. While this would be consequential for many people, to David, it was almost as if he were describing something commonplace. I asked him about what his friends thought about his visitors and he smiled at me and replied, "I would never tell them. My visitors warned me that people who talk with them are usually looked at as crazy." He chuckled, and continued, "With the exception of you, I would never tell anyone." Now, at 31, he still has visits, and many of them want information on people they know, or their relatives, and David tries to answer within reason. If they become too invasive with their requests, he says he just tunes them out. David is different, but today, he is a successful engineer, and has a wife and 2 children. It makes me wonder if my imaginary friend was a very weak version of what he experiences on a daily basis.
What toxic behavior has been normalized by society? In 11th grade, one of my classmates developed a strong crush on my best friend. He'd waste his day staring at her and would pester me all the time, in order to gather some information about her. Almost everyone in the class was aware of his feelings. My best friend wasn't into dating at that time and she was crystal clear about her decision. So when this guy approached her, she politely refused. But that didn't seem to get into his mind. He aimed to try a little harder this time. He started lavishing her with unsolicited gifts and chocolates, doubled up his stalking abilities and did all the stuff that made me count him as a creep. When my best friend finally declared that it was still a big fat no from her side, this guy tried another new tactic. He amassed truckloads of sympathy from all the other classmates and asked them to persuade her. And guess what? They obeyed him. Now each one of them would request my best friend to date that guy, notice his efforts and at least give it a shot. They'd even ask her, "Why are you playing so hard to get?" Or "Why are you so hard to impress?" But none of them realized that she has all the rights to decide for herself. What toxic behavior has been normalized by the society? Not respecting someone's free will. Not respecting someone's personal opinions. Not respecting someone's reasons. The next time when you ask someone to join you for a movie, and if they say that they don't feel like, respect their decision. Don't tell them it will be fun or you'll miss a lot kind of stuff. It's okay to request once, but if that doesn't work, you need to know and stop. My golden child little brother threatened me with a weapon and my parents don't care. Every single day, multiple times a day my brother will have a complete meltdown over video games. He would scream obscenities at the screen, throw his chair and stomp on the floor as hard as he can. I finally came upstairs and yelled at him to stop because it was driving me insane and I finally had enough. He walks into the kitchen, pulls a weapon out of the drawer and says, "Go the F back downstairs." By the look in his eyes, I can tell he really wanted to do it. I was shocked. I called for Mom and he just puts the weapon back and goes back to his game so he can pretend that he didn't do anything. My mom came inside the house from the backyard and I said he needs help. He just pointed a weapon at me. Please get him therapy because he isn't normal. She calmly tells my brother to go upstairs and completely ignores the fact that I'm shaking and crying. No reaction, no fear, No concern, nothing. Just another day. I grabbed my cat and something so I can spend the night at a friend's house. On my way out the door, my mom said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm not staying here. He is going to cut my throat in my sleep." Then she told me that he wasn't actually going to do anything. Again, just acting like what he did wasn't completely messed up. She didn't care how upset I was, and she didn't care that my brother was making a violent threat towards me. Even my stepdad responded with, "You guys need to quit bickering like this was just another innocent sibling fight." They didn't give a single care. I should mention that my brother has violent outbursts all the time. He hits our sister, threatens to unalive us all, physically fought our mom, kicked one of our dogs, has hundreds of holes punched into his bedroom walls as well as weapon marks. He punched a dent into our mom's car and told his friends he was going to sneak into our parents' room in the middle of the night and cut my mom's throat. I know we want to say that he is just being a boy, but this kid is seriously twisted. He always wants to do something violent and always threatens to unalive us with complete seriousness in his voice. I just want a normal family. I'm 24 years old. I moved out when I was 18, but my fiancé died in a motorcycle accident last year, so I had to move back in with the parents because I couldn't afford a place on my own. My little brother was bad before, but I never realized how much worse he got until I started living with him again.
What was the worst way you saw someone ruin their life? A guy I used to work with got himself into crazy levels of debt. A local guy won the lottery. Nothing major, but still life-changing. Something like $30,000. We were all on our lunch break, talking about what we would do if we won that much. I would pay off these credit cards, or I would trade in my car for a newer model. This guy says that it wouldn't make a difference. At 23 he was already over $200,000 in debt between credit cards and personal loans. He would just get another loan to pay something off, and keep borrowing. A few months later he was complaining about how he was now an additional $50,000 in debt on top of it. This guy was only making around $40,000 a year. He got the bright idea to file bankruptcy. Lost his car, his house, his job. Last I knew he was staying at friends' houses couch surfing, working for a pittance, just trying to survive.
Have you ever broken up with someone and regretted it later? If so, why? Broke up with my girlfriend because she didn't really fit into my idea of who I wanted to be with. About 2 weeks later it suddenly hit me. She was a kind person who genuinely liked and accepted me. WTF was I doing? Asked her to reconsider and she said no. We remained friends, and a few weeks later I asked her to reconsider again. She said no because she didn't know if I was just lonely or wanted to be with her. Told me to wait a few months and then decide if I wanted to ask her again. We've been married for close to 10 years and I've never been happier. Broke up with a girl because she was about to head back to a fancy college and I assumed she'd quickly break up with me after a few weeks there. I was determined to not be the one getting dumped, so I did it first. Turns out she was devastated and was planning on making a long-distance thing work. I felt terrible, but I couldn't just take it back, so I decided to give her some space. Half a year later, at Christmas break, we started talking again and quickly got back together.
My boyfriend cried in front of me for the first time. I've been with my boyfriend for 2.5-ish years now. He's never been comfortable talking about his emotions. The only person he's ever confided in was his mother when he was a child/teen. Some people refer to him as a robot. Obviously, in the past, I'd expressed my desire for him to talk to me about things that are affecting him, but he just fobs it off. We fought about it in the past, and he has said he just cannot get the words out. Earlier this week, his family learned that his mother will be passing very soon. As in potentially a couple of weeks even. It came as a surprise to all of them. I asked for advice on another sub earlier in the week about how I can make him feel comfortable being vulnerable around me. I'm rather introverted myself, so I was worried I would mess it up. I offered to wash his hair. I don't know why. I just feel like I'd love if my partner offered to do it for me when I was feeling down. Well, when he eventually came home he looked rough as anything. I'd already made dinner so we sat down to eat it, but we pretty much ate in silence. He rarely even looked up from his food. I asked if he wanted to talk, and again he fobbed me off. Once we'd finished I asked him if he'd like to shower with me. It would have been a couple days at least since he'd have been able to have one. I dimmed the bathroom lights and put some relaxing music we both enjoy on the speaker. Got the shower nice and hot, gently helped him undress and had him sit on the bench thing under the water while I finished undressing. I joined him on the bench and slowly washed him everywhere, taking breaks to rest my head on his or whisper something to him. I spent a while massaging his head as I washed his hair. I kept kissing him on the lips, forehead, neck and occasionally embracing him. Rubbing his shoulders and places I thought he'd be aching after being up and about for 2 days. There was nothing sexual about the atmosphere, it was a whole different type of intense intimacy. It's difficult to describe. He'd hardly said a word during all this and he looked like he could cry any minute. I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want to pressure him into anything, so I just looked him in the eyes, smiled, and said it's okay. Once we were done we both sat there for a while on the bench under the water, not speaking, just enjoying each other's company. I kept running my hand up and down his back, across his cheek or head. Just trying to make him relax as much as possible. Once I dried him and myself off, we got into bed and I stuck the TV on. I was half watching it and half playing with his hair. I asked if he wanted to talk about anything and he shook his head. I could tell he was really upset despite his trying to hide it. Maybe 20 minutes later I could see him literally on the verge of tears. I rolled to my side and put my arms around him, pulling him into my chest. That's when he started. The tears began to flow and he sobbed and sobbed. He was squeezing me so tight sometimes it wasn't easy to breathe. I could feel the years of bottled up emotions flowing out. He continued crying harder and it broke my heart. He said something about his mom but I couldn't hear as it was muffled. Seeing the guy you love like that, clinging onto you as though you were going to leave whilst he let it all out, hurt my heart. I felt so bad for him, I had some tears myself. I just held him tight and kept whispering how much I loved him, that it was okay, I'm here, I've got you, etc. Even when he eventually stopped sobbing, he continued to have his arms wrapped around me so tightly with his face buried in either my stomach or chest. I continued just comforting him until he fell asleep. Usually, I don't like cuddling when sleeping, but that night I held him all night long. I just couldn't bring myself to let him out of my grip. I left a little note on his bedside table before I went out on Sunday. I outlined that I enjoyed our shower time and spending intimate time together like that. I said that I don't expect him to bring it up if he doesn't want, that I know how hard it is for him to speak about those things, but I'll be here for him if he ever does. If he decides that he wants to write something, I'll read it, that I love him more than he can ever imagine. I said that I'd like him to feel free to ask me if I can shower with him whenever he needs. I didn't expect any response from him on the topic, to be honest, but later that evening he handed me a small note before going into the other room to play his game. I won't go into details as it was only for me to read, but one line stood out to me the most. I don't have the words to express my gratitude, but I think you know. Thank you for making me feel human for the first time in so many years. The whole thing was so sweet, I cried a few happy tears. I'm dreading his mother's passing, but I'm hoping he'll let me be there for him, even if it's just a shoulder to cry on.
Boyfriend shies from public affection with me, but cuddles up with friends. Why? I am a 20-year-old college student who shares a friend group with Brad, a 22-year-old. Brad expressed his romantic feelings for me, and before we officially started dating, he would often be physically affectionate in public, like resting his head on my shoulder during movie nights or cuddling up to me when he was intoxicated. As someone who appreciates physical touch, I continued this behavior when we began dating, but Brad suddenly expressed discomfort with any physical touch in public. He explained that growing up in a homophobic small town caused him anxiety and displaying affection publicly now that we were in a relationship. I assured him that his feelings were valid, and we avoided any physical contact in public. No hand-holding, no sitting close to each other on the couch, not even under the table. However, this change has made me feel a bit hurt. Although I acknowledge that I am fortunate not to have experienced overt homophobia, I try to understand and support Brad through his struggles. I make an effort to spend quality time together when we are alone, but he has been very busy lately. The issue arises when Brad becomes incredibly physically affectionate with our other friends in a way I haven't witnessed before. He will snuggle up to our male friends, rest his head on their shoulders, and engage in platonic physical affection. Most of our friend group is gay, and I don't suspect that Brad has any romantic feelings towards them. I can tell it is purely platonic, as our group tends to be physically affectionate with one another. However, witnessing this behavior makes me feel rejected and worthless. I haven't discussed this with Brad because I believe it is his choice, and I don't want to control him. However, he noticed that I appear upset or annoyed whenever he is physically affectionate with our friends. This led to a huge fight where he accused me of being possessive and jealous, due to my negative reactions. I apologized, but I still feel that I didn't do anything wrong because I never demanded he stop. My facial expressions may have unintentionally conveyed my emotions, but I question if I am being possessive by reacting negatively at all.
I am a woman who was falsely accused of a sex crime. It ruined my life. Every time I've read about false rape accusations on the internet, it's always been a story about a woman accusing a man. I want people to hear my story. When I was 18, I took a high school photography class with mostly freshmen. Since I was a transfer student, I had to make up credits most seniors had already finished. I had my locker in the freshman hallway, ate lunch with the younger students because that's where the school had space for me. Most of my friends were freshmen and sophomores, and I didn't think anything of it. My mental illnesses has left me a bit emotionally stunted, so I always felt immature for my age. At the time, my psychiatrist was trying to find medication that would cure my panic attacks. I was taking a lot of prescription sedatives that made my brain fuzzy. It was hard to focus or retain detailed memories. It felt like I was a little drunk all the time. One day when we didn't have school, a boy from my class invited me to hang out at his grandma's house. He had some chairs and a TV set up in the garage. I remember him being verbally flirtatious, and the next moment, I was on the floor with my pants down. I tried to get up but felt the weight of him holding me down as he inserted something I couldn't see, fingers, into me. He was younger, but taller and heavier than me. I tried to shake it off like a bad dream, but the next day I was bleeding and in pain, not from a period, so I went to the school nurse and told her what happened. Biggest mistake of my life, she told the police. I gave my side of the story to a female officer and she went to interview the boy, who told her I wanted it. Imagine my surprise when I got a notice in the mail that I was being charged with felony criminal sexual conduct with a minor. The boy was a few months under the age of consent. A year of legal battles followed. My therapist defended my innocence, mentioning her concern about my unusually low intimate drive. The boy's own parents spoke in my defense as well, telling the judge that he had brought other girls home when he wasn't supposed to. It didn't matter. The prosecuting attorney told me that if I really believed I was innocent, I could take the case to trial, but if I lost, I could face 5 years in prison and time on the sex offender registry. If I pled guilty, I'd get a stay of adjudication, the charge would drop off my record after 5 years, and I could continue my life on unsupervised probation. I was 19 then and had just been accepted into college. I took the plea because I was terrified of being locked up. I just wanted to move far away from that place and be a normal teenager. I didn't fully grasp that the charge would never really go away. During the pandemic, my grandpa died and I inherited enough money to apply for an expungement. I defended myself and won my case in a virtual hearing, but it's still not completely gone. My FBI background check states there may be arrest data on file, though it doesn't say why. I'm now in a long-distance relationship and worried we will never be able to live in the same place. His country requires a clean police certificate, and if I apply to sponsor him to come to the United States, I have to declare my SX charge on the application and prove that I'm, without a reasonable doubt, no danger to my partner. I'm not a danger to anyone. This event left me so scarred that I've never been able to let someone touch me intimately without pain. My current boyfriend has been very patient and understanding, but many other relationships have ended because of my lack of desire. The guy who hurt me is married now. He gets to be with the person he loves. It's not fair. My son avoids his kids and I went and publicly called him out about it. My 32-year-old daughter-in-law and 33-year-old son have 3 kids, ages 3, 2, and 4 months. He convinced her to stop working and sell her business by talking about how great his childhood was and how happy my marriage was. But he didn't mention that our deal was to split things evenly only before 9 a.m. and after 5 p.m., with Sundays off and twice-a-week breaks for me. Now, onto the story. During my last visit, I noticed my daughter-in-law was having a hard time. So, my 55-year-old sister and her 53-year-old girlfriend chipped in money with me to give them a spa weekend while we watched the kids for her birthday. I was getting ready on Thursday evening for the kids when my daughter-in-law called, holding back tears. She said they wouldn't be going to the spa because my son's friend came to town, and he wanted to hang out with them all weekend. I asked her about her situation, and she opened up about my son not helping with chores or date nights and her taking care of the kids mostly by herself because that's what stay-at-home moms do. I was really upset. I convinced her to drop off the kids with me and bring a friend to the spa. I even gave her 500 euros from my savings to treat herself. When she brought the kids over, I asked her where my son was. She said he was at the bar. She left for the spa, and I went to the bar. This is where things might not have been great. I went to the bar where he and his friends were. I sat down with them and asked my son, "Did I let you down as a mom, or was it your dad? Because we both believed your partner should come before your stupid drinking buddies." To make a long story short, I embarrassed him and got banned from the bar. My daughter-in-law plans to take the kids to her parents when she returns tomorrow, and my son is upset with me, calling me an a-hole for getting involved in his marriage. Maybe I should have stayed out of it, I'm not sure.
What is a lie you have told, that has gotten so ridiculously out of hand that you've had to keep building on it and is now a part of your life? I'm the kind of person that always leaves my shoes tied and just slips them on. I'm dating this girl for a couple months and then one day my shoe gets untied but I'm too lazy to retie it. It really bothers her and she insists on me tying it. I really don't want to bend over and do it for some reason. It was around the time when Liam Neeson got his shoe tied by Olivia Wilde and I was crazy jealous because I really liked Olivia Wilde since watching House. She eventually asks me, "Don't you know how to tie your shoes?" In my head I'm seeing Liam Neeson getting his shoes tied by Olivia Wilde and how badass it looks, so I say no. I never learned how. You can't tell anyone. To this day, when my shoe gets untied in public she will pull me off to the side away from other people and secretly tie my shoe. For some reason it makes her happy and it's the sweetest thing ever. I can't understand how she would even tolerate a grown man who doesn't know how to tie his own shoe. I'll never be Liam Neeson cool, but I've found my Olivia Wilde.
My 34-year-old husband is obsessed with our boss's 20-year-old daughter. My husband and I work at a small firm. During the work time our boss would occasionally bring his then teenage daughter to work. She should have been around 15 when we first met her, and had her interact with the employees and stuff to show her what we were doing, how things work, etc. Fast forward to January of this year, the boss brought her in, officially, letting us know that she will be taking over a good deal of his work overlooking things. We were initially hesitant, considering she was so young, turned 20 this year, but ultimately, she wasn't taking over, more so learning to handle the business while the boss managed other work. It helped that she herself was also very keen on cooperating and taking advice, often holding meetings to discuss things and making sure she herself is the last to leave work almost every time. It's been an overall good development in that regard. The issue started initially a few months after she started. She would occasionally hold office events, just to lighten the mood, and this earned her a lot of praise, from all of us, since it's not something the old boss would have time to look into. We were all talking about her, so it didn't feel too weird at first when my husband joined in on the praising. How impressive it is she's so young but so mature, how she's been a breath of fresh air in the office, everyone's so motivated to work cause of her, etc. With hindsight, it seems like that was just his in on talking about her with me in general. Every now and then, he'd start singing her praises, when we're at home, a huge talking point always being how she's so mature for her age and understanding, even pointing out how we weren't at that age. I didn't take it much to heart, until one time I joked that it was fine if he was immature at times, and that I would love him regardless, and his response was something along the lines of, "Well, you were too, unlike her." I think that was the first time I felt a bit bad, because it felt like he actually was just comparing me to her now. But I tried not to think too much about it. This slowly spiraled too, going from talking about her maturity to looks, how she can still look good while being so busy with studies and work, how she, and I quote, was definitely more gifted compared to other girls. Once, out of insecurity, I asked if he thought she was prettier than me. He gave me an, "Of course you're attractive to me, but objectively, like, not considering my attraction to you, she is prettier." This messed with me for a while, and we ended up having a fight, where I essentially banned him from bringing her up with me, if it's not work-related. Also adding to it, was the fact that he started taking extra work every now and then, and working overtime, and while I initially thought it was to just earn extra money, I later found out it was simply because he knew she usually heads home late too, usually after most if not all office employees left. Fast forward to a few days back, the weekend happened. My husband was out with his friends, and my laptop was being repaired, so I used his laptop, without his permission. I had put some videos on autopay as background noise as I did some work, when I opened his PC folder and on the left quick access bar, there was a folder with our boss's daughter's name. I had to click it, and when I did, I actively couldn't believe what I was seeing. A folder of over 1K plus pictures of her, screenshots from Instagram and other apps, any and every picture he could find of her, and an insane number of pictures just taken without her consent, with either a hidden camera or his phone at the office. It all ranged from her just sitting or working, to some from a high enough angle to get cleavage or down blouse, and even a few under the table shots. This creeped me out, beyond anything, since it was almost impossible to place my husband, who I have always known as the sweetest guy, for the 6 years we have been married, as someone who would do something like this. I was shocked and just didn't really know how to react. If I should feel disgusted or sad, angry, I don't know. But then, it got worse. I used a search to look up her name on his laptop and found something that basically turned any form of sorrow or sadness I would have felt into just pure disgust. He basically had a folder poorly hidden deep in a number of folders, just full of photoshopped pictures of her, some solo, some with him, some with other members of the office, and some just absolutely vile and disgusting. I was furious, but I also didn't want him to know yet. So I acted normal that night, and then the next day, I called up my cousin, asked if she needed help with her pregnancy, and used that as an excuse to move in and help her for a bit. I have talked to my husband, though limited, mostly through text and occasionally at work, but for the last 4 days, I have been living with my cousin. Honestly, I am disgusted, but I also don't know what to do exactly. I feel a mixture of being cheated on, which, I know he didn't do anything with her, but still, I can't explain it. But on top of that, I feel disgusted that my husband was this sort of a man. What should I do?
Has anyone ever taken a DNA test and found something completely shocking? You have to remember before doing this to be careful what you wish for. It can bring up family secrets. I have a coworker who took a DNA test. When he got it back, it showed up that he was half Ashkenazi Jewish. He knew for sure that this was not possible. He posted it on Facebook and joked that there was a mailman involved. His mother posted back, "Call me." It turns out that there was a sperm donor. This is important for his daughters. There are some specific genes for breast cancer that have a higher incidence for Ashkenazi Jewish people. He found a group on one of the DNA tracking websites for people who were half related to some anonymous donor. The donor had many offspring. Some of them were very upset, some of them were okay with it. My friend was having a hoot with it. He tells me that they are pretty certain who the donor was. 5 years later, my wife is on the website and looks at her family tree. Since the last time, there was a bunch more on it. She looks closely, and here is my friend who is distantly related through this sperm donor. For privacy, they left the name of the donor blank. For us, this is quite fun. As I mentioned above, some people learn something like this and are really upset that their parents never told them. Of course, they fail to account for that without the donor, they wouldn't be there to be upset.
What is the cruelest thing you've seen a child do? A few years ago, my sister gave away Zoe, the schnauzer I had raised since puppyhood, to one of her friends. I will admit, technically Zoe was hers, but I had taken care of her. In my eyes, Zoe was my dog. Months later, we were gifted with one of her puppies, a cute lovable little black bundle of fur that could fit in the palm of my hand. Like an idiot, I fell in love with him while being told that no, he was not my dog, he belonged to my niece and nephew. Same old story, the kids get all excited for the new puppy before ignoring him to play with the new toys while someone gets stuck with the usual dog chores. Now, I was still a student and the only grown-up willing to do anything about the dog. My sis only bought the food, bowl and collar, Everything else was meant to be done by our kids. This means that no one really kept an eye on him. One day while doing my homework, I noticed that my niece and nephew were both in the laundry room giggling and that something was thumping. I sneaked a peek through the door. The little brats were putting the 2-month-old puppy on top of the washing machine and pushing him off, all the while laughing like it was some kind of game. The thumping noise, the sound of the little guy falling on the concrete floor, that was the only time I smacked those two for being idiots. I ended up snatching the puppy and later taking him to the vet when he threw up. When I moved out, dog came with me. Long story short, puppy is all grown up and growls at the sight of those two little monsters. Apparently they had done that same stunt several times and had just gotten away with a token slap on the wrist by dear old sis whenever they got caught. Dog hates her too.
Torn between my actions and my self-image, has anyone else felt repulsed by their own behavior? I have been feeling stuck for the past 5 years, and I don't know how to break free. I made the decision to step away from my university because I disliked my program and was struggling with my mental health. Most days, I find myself lying in bed, feeling empty and disgusted with who I am. I'm ashamed of my appearance, my teeth, my body, and even the way I talk and think. It feels like everything about me is wrong. I also treat my parents poorly, even though deep down, I know they only want the best for me. However, they have hurt me physically, verbally, and emotionally in the past. There were times when they were not there for me when I needed them, but I never reached out because I didn't want to burden them or damage our family. They often assumed the worst of me and constantly nag and blame me for our difficulties. It hurts, but I should never respond with hurtful words. They try to be good parents and provide for me. However, it's hard for me to trust their kindness because I'm always waiting for things to fall apart. Unfortunately, my fears usually come true. Adding to my struggles, I'm currently unemployed at the age of 20. I have no education, no money, and no support network. I feel like a total failure. I've become lazy and mentally drained from spending so much time online. The truth is, we are also financially disadvantaged. My mother was right when she called me worthless and useless. I should be grateful and contribute by finding a job to support them. But I can't bring myself to do that because my anxiety holds me back. Every time I step outside, I imagine people judging me and tearing me apart based on my appearance. It's irrational, but it affects me deeply. I'm overly sensitive, and it's difficult for me to handle. On top of everything else, I believe I may have a hypersexual tendency. Physical intimacy is something I desire, but I haven't engaged in it due to my appearance and mental health. It doesn't stop the constant thoughts and urges. The only thing holding me back, aside from my circumstances, is my fear and disgust towards men. You know what's messed up? There are times when I feel so touch deprived and desperate that I wish someone would use me and fulfill those desires, just to feel something, to feel real. But that is absolutely not the solution. It's disheartening to realize that I don't respect myself and that I see myself as a loser and trash. Deep down, I want to improve and do better. However, I'm also afraid of trying because I fear that even if I do well, it won't be enough for me to be loved. I worry that my fundamental problem lies not in the bad things that have happened to me or the mistakes I've made, but rather in who I am. I fear that I am inherently unlovable, even if I achieve success. Connecting with others and trusting people seems impossible for me. Honestly, I don't even understand why I'm still alive in this state. Furthermore, I can't succumb to thoughts of ending my life because I don't want to burden my parents with hospitalization and burial costs. I feel lost and broken. I can't confide in anyone because I don't want them to look at me and see the self-loathing and disgust that I see in myself. I feel damaged, disgusting, like a failure. I wish I could escape all these troubles, or even have amnesia, so I could start fresh as a new and unbroken person. I long to be someone good, capable of both receiving and giving love. Unfortunately, that's not possible. I wish someone would believe in me, stick by my side, and genuinely believe that I can overcome my struggles. But deep down, I know I can only rely on myself to fix my life and save myself. I'm exhausted beyond measure. Redditors who have cut family members off from their lives, what was the final straw for you? My father is a dope addict and a narcissist. My whole childhood had him rarely playing a significant role, and when I did see him, he had every excuse as to why. As I got a little older, I started to second-guess the context of earlier events and hear him repeat self-serving lies to people that I knew weren't true. Then he started getting incarcerated. His disappearing for a weekend or even a week at a time was one thing, but his spending weeks or months in rehab or prison was a whole different thing. My mother finally kicked him to the curb, and any of the times I bothered to be around him after that, my mother never discouraged a relationship with him or said a bad word about him. Despite having more than enough reason to, he always tried to act more like a friend than a parent. One of the last times he got arrested and went to prison was for a period of months. I didn't talk to him for a stretch, and then when I did again, I told him that if he ever touched another dope, then we were done. He would no longer be my father or have any place in my life. Fast forward a few years and I was just laid off from a job I really enjoyed. I had just walked into my apartment and was basically in tears knowing I had to tell my roommate that I lost my job and had no idea where my rent was going to come from in 10 days. Then I get a phone call from my sister to say that the asshat had gotten arrested and was going away for 7 years. He had let me down my whole life. He had made his addiction everyone else's fault. He badmouthed his friends, his family, my mother, her family, and everybody. He missed every memorable and important event from my childhood. He never paid a cent of child support, so I grew up poor with a single mother trying to pay for herself and 3 kids. He even, at least, once took some of my stuff and sold it, presumably for dope money. I had overlooked, or at least accepted, all of that. But that news and that gut punch of disappointment on what was already a very bad day were just too much. I told her I didn't care and to let him know not to contact me when he got out. Unfortunately, he did eventually get out. I sincerely hoped he would just die in prison so he could stop hurting and disappointing my siblings, and has since gotten all kinds of people to feel sorry for him through a mix of his annoyingly effective charisma and also an abundance of lies, but I've held firm in not saying a word to him. He's tried sending me letters and everyone was tossed in a bonfire unopened. He's tried having relatives pass me messages from him, but I informed them quickly that anyone acting as his mouthpiece will get cut from my life as well. And honestly, it feels great. People always say dumb crap like, but he's still your father. You only get one, or you should forgive him for your own sake, but that's all horse crap. The thing I did for my sake was remove the toxic person. It was 100% the right move, and my only regret is that I didn't do it much sooner and save some of the extra heartaches. And yeah, you do only get one father. You also only get one gallbladder. And if it starts to become toxic and dangerous to your health, they cut the crap out of your body so you can continue living a healthy and happy life.
I went through his phone, and I regret everything. My 32 female husband, 34 male, cheats on me. I don't know if it's physical, but it is at least heavy flirting and emotional. It's his former coworker, Lacey, 35 female. She's married, retired by person, to a woman, I don't know her name, so for the sake of this, we'll call her Corin, 26 female, who, up until now, I thought was crazy. I would hear the stories of how Corin would call multiple times when Lindsay would give H a ride home. My car broke down, and he wasn't running at the time. I would hear that Corin demanded I was with them in the car. I thought she was nuts and young and insecure. So to Corin, I'm so sorry for thinking that. The signs were there. I didn't want to see them, but lately, I can't ignore them. He started turning his phone face down. He's always been somewhat private with his phone, but it's gotten so much worse. We just had a baby in December. I haven't worked since then, so I am entirely reliant on him. He's sitting there having such flirtatious conversations with her and then turns around and has relations with me. Like literally last night. I am so disgusted and physically nauseous. I can't seem to catch my breath, and I've been shaking since I found out. I can't look at him. I don't want to. I guess it's karma, though. I admit I did the same thing to my ex-husband with my current husband. I think I should have expected it to come back around. It just hurts.
Abuse my grandparents and neglect me as a father? Enjoy being homeless. My father and I have historically had a rocky relationship. My parents divorced when I was 5 and he married the women he cheated on my mother with. I was an only child and she had 4 kids from a previous marriage. During my childhood years, I spent most of the allocated time dedicated to my father in the divorce with my paternal grandparents. Every 2 weeks and 42 days in the summer. They lived in a different state and I cherished the time I had with them because they would always go to bat for me. There was some tension caused early in my dad's new marriage due to my stepmom demanding that my grandparents go back to the store one Christmas and get an equal amount of gifts for all of her children, even taking some from me and gifting them to her youngest. I spent many times sitting on my mom's sofa waiting for my dad to pick me up and he never did. I would later find out he was on family vacations with his new family. My grandparents picked up his slack. We spent summers learning how to make baskets, gardening, camping and various different activities. Their home was a second home to me. When I was 13 I went to live with my dad after some methodical brainwashing and I then would rarely see my grandparents. My grandmother would call and they would ignore it. It would hurt my heart to see it on the caller ID knowing they were just on the other line, but my dad and stepmother would not allow it unless I sat at a table with them while on a call. Fast forward to summer of my freshman year when we went to visit my dad's side of the family. On the last night my aunt and uncle who lived next door asked if I could stay the night with my cousins. My stepmom wanted her youngest daughter to be included. They declined because my stepsister was a thief. A fight ensued in the front yard that night resulting in physical altercations. My stepmother shoved my 74-year-old grandpa to the ground. He had a hip replacement in the 90s and already had a stiff walk. I was utterly terrified and distraught. As the chaos ensued, I packed my belongings because they said we were leaving. I vowed then that this would be the last straw and I would never forgive them. We missed their 50th wedding anniversary because my stepmom was still upset over what his family did to her that night. The next spring my pap had a stroke and it was never the same. The man that helped raise me during his son's shortcomings didn't remember my name. He died in 2014. Later I left home when I was 18 to go to college, where I met my husband. He has been my rock and helped when my dad throws fits in the last few years when he doesn't get his way. He has shown me nothing but unconditional love and support and is the father to our child. I go no contact with dad every couple years because of his behavior. There is an old saying that time heals all wounds, but I don't believe that to always be true. I maintained a relationship with my paternal grandmother until her death in December. She was a cheeky one who left notes for us to find after death. This woman never forgot a thing when she felt slighted. That was also reflected in her will. I inherited the house that had been deeded to me since 2001. My dad knew they would give it to me, but I honestly think he thought he had a chance of fighting me for it. Since 2012, He and my stepmom have been living in an RV that is now starting to fall apart. He is retired military and has no savings. Right after the funeral, he stashed his belongings in closets. I discovered this after I changed the locks and added cameras, as I live out of state and wanted security for the home before I sell my house and move into my childhood home. I put his stuff and what was owed to him in storage, and my uncle gave him the keys. After learning this, he's been furious. My step-siblings keep reaching out telling me I'm heartless for keeping him out of his parents' home. He called crying and I coldly told him if they wanted him to have it they would have left it to him. I also told him he should have treated his parents better when they were alive. I have the deed in my hands and there's nothing left for him to do about it. The estate is almost settled and what land he does get will also have my name on the deed. I would rather share my childhood home with my daughter and all the whimsical things it had to offer. Even if my dad ends up homeless.
You and a super intelligent snail both get $1 million, and you both become immortal. However, you die if the snail touches you. It always knows where you are and slowly crawls toward you. What's your plan? First things first, that $1 million is practically worthless compared to immortality. Every dime of that cash can and should be spent ensuring that the snail never, ever reaches me. First things first, I keep an eye on him. It's tempting to want to hop on a plane or a train and get as far away as possible. But once I do that, he's gone and I'll never see him again until 3 a.m. on July 14, 2072, when the sneaky little cuss slips in the door and slimes onto me before I ever wake up and notice him. No, I'm going to be within visual distance of the snail, slowly moving away from it, until snail. Containment plan part A is done. Next I grab my phone. I call up someone I can trust with my life, and tell them to come to my location within the hour, and to bring a metal cash box, a good padlock, and a firearm. Once they arrive, I inform them of the deal and ask them to grab the snail, shove it into the metal box, and lock it up. Once the snail is temporarily secured, I ask my friend to carry around the box, never letting it out of their sight, and to prevent its opening with as much force as is required. We arrive at some reasonable figure for this service. Maybe $50,000. Now we can start in on the real work. I'm on the phone again, contracting with a tungsten machining service out of Willowbrook, Illinois. I ask them to construct for me a hollow tungsten sphere with a small, sealable opening, ideally via both exterior bolts and sintering. I ask them for a rush job and a thick wall depth, perhaps as much as a foot thick. The spherical shape should keep material costs as low as possible for a given thickness, but between the unusual object, large amount of tungsten, and speedy delivery, I invest a truly insane amount into this project, let's say $100,000. I ask them to deliver it to my current location as fast as possible. Once the tungsten ball arrives, I have my friend stand well away from me and transfer the snail into the center of the sphere. I ask them to pour a little salt down into the hole after it, just to give the snail a little reminder of who he's dealing with. Once snail and salt are both inside, we seal the hollow sphere with the bolts. Tungsten is an amazing material. Incredibly tough, dense, and heat resistant. You could drop it into molten lava and it wouldn't matter. Which, coincidentally, is almost what I'd like to do next. Now we make sure that damn thing stays shut. I find the nearest metal refinery and call them up. I also contract with a heavy machinery moving company to move the tungsten sphere to the refinery. Once the refinery has sintered the tungsten sphere shut, I buy an entire industrial crucible, those big buckets, of molten iron. And the crucible the iron came in. I have them drop the tungsten sphere into the molten iron, and let the whole mass cool in place. Mr. Snaily Snail ain't going anywhere, but I'm probably down another $100,000. Now I'm on the phone to specialist movers. Chartering a boat. We're taking this thing halfway around the world. We take the boat right over the Marianas Trench, not the deepest point, but deep enough. We push the whole assembly over the side. Literal tons of once molten iron, refinery crucible, tungsten, salt, and snail slip over the side and begin dropping into the briny deep. Another $100,000 gone, but well worth the cost. Good. That's bought me a little breathing room. But we're not anywhere close to done yet. I still have at least $500,000 left. I'm going to invest it into solid business ventures and slow-growing but secure assets. We're building a fortune, and who cares if it takes a few centuries? I'm frickin' immortal, baby. But as I develop my fortune, it's getting invested into space. SpaceX, asteroid mining projects, whatever. I am trapped on the one planet in the entire universe where I can actually die, and I have no intention of staying there. Over the millennia, I slowly apply my fortune and influence to push mankind to the stars. And the moment living on another planet becomes viable, I'm there. And the instant a habitable planet is around another star? I'm on the first generation ship heading that direction. But I can't think in such a short-sighted manner now. I'm immortal, and I need to think like it. Eventually, the sun is going to burn the earth to a crisp, and then that damn snail is going to be free. It might take him a few million years to land on something, but he'll do it eventually. And then he will construct a spacecraft and begin crawling towards me again. What I care about now is light cones and black holes. Earth's gotta go. Sorry, whatever's left of humanity. We evacuate anyone still on the old planet, and use a gravity tractor to push Earth into a black hole. A nice, big one so that Hawking radiation will take an incredibly long time to evaporate it away into nothing. And then I board a ship. A fast ship. I accelerate to as close to light speed as I can get, piloting directly away from the black hole with the snail inside. I want to be so far away and moving so quickly that the heat death of the universe would occur far, far before the snail ever reaches me. Even on the fastest ship his freakishly clever little brain can construct. So that's the way the universe ends. With nothing in it except for infrared heat, one hyper-intelligent snail suspended in an inky void, and one human screaming away from it. Cheers. Who is the worst person you know? When I was in high school, I worked at a restaurant with a girl involved in a rehab program, which only allowed her to go out for a certain time every day. She was also 17. She couldn't drive or have her own cell phone, so she had a designated driver from the rehab that would pick up and drop her off at specific times. Apparently, her driver is a weirdo and groomer, and he wouldn't stop bothering her and has offered her money for sex many times and even asked her to run away with him. One day when I was at work, this old-looking bald guy, who was the driver guy as she told me later, came inside desperately wanting to see her. She went hiding and tells me to tell the guy to leave and that she was not there, which I did. He went off after hearing that. Then he tries to brute force his way but failed miserably. He left after not too long, but left a message on a napkin for her before he left. I read the message, and I clearly remember it. I need an answer now. I'm offering you $1,500 to run away with me. If not, I'm coming to get you myself. Don't say I didn't warn you. I gave it to her. She didn't read it, and threw it in the trash right away. A few days later, the girl quits without notice. From what I heard, she went to a different rehab. After she left, the guy would show up around 10 a.m. every day at the restaurant looking for her, and I kept warning the guy to leave. He eventually stopped after a few weeks. The guy was definitely a groomer, as she's not the only victim. Apparently, 2 more girls who are minors were facing the same issue as my coworker. After the reports, he was fired from the rehab as a driver and they pressed him for sexual misconduct with a minor, child exploitation, and possession of child sex videos.
A violent stranger attacked my car after I refused to apologize for his mistake. My boyfriend kept me up all night arguing from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., so I wasn't exactly lucid when I woke up 2 hours later. I was due to house sit for a friend that day and I needed to get the hell out of his flat because he didn't want me there. Bags in hand, I lugged myself through the underground amused by what seemed to be endless delays and rammed carriages. Owing to my sleep-deprived state, my mom kindly offered to come and meet me for some support. She drove down to London in my car. I took over the wheel and we made our way over to my friend's flat. I noticed how anxious I was changing gear. My shoulders were tense and I could feel a heat building in my chest. I think I skipped a red light and definitely used the wrong lane. When we got to our destination, I trawled the street looking for a space and there was only one, but it was tight. I lined the car up, paused in the road to look to my left. I didn't look both ways, and started my maneuver when Mum yelled, "Whoa, stop." I slammed on my brakes just in time to see a dark figure whip past the windscreen on an e-scooter, narrowly missing my car. He stopped about 50 yards away and slowly turned, inching his way to the car and pulling up to the passenger window, eyeballing Mum. I stared vacantly at him for a second, failing to register that he was mouthing something to me. My mum bravely rolled down the window and asked if he was okay. He aggressively barked, "Fam, you always hit my effing scooter." I said I didn't mean to. I didn't see you and I was clearly in the middle of the road with my indicators on. Why didn't you go onto the pathway? E-scooters aren't supposed to be used on a road. He was furious and said, "Look, you stuck-up beach. I want an apology for almost killing me." At that moment I snapped. I should have thought about my mum as she was closer to him than me, but I bluntly replied saying that I was nowhere near killing him and that I wasn't going to apologize. He paused, his wide eyes scanning us both, and asked, "Is this your mum?" I nodded, again not thinking, and he said, "You were lucky because if she wasn't here I'd F you up." And with that, he took out a pipe and started smashing at my left mirror. Quickly, we rolled up the windows and started to drive away, and I saw him jump back on his scooter and vanish. We circled the car back around and returned to the pool of broken glass by my friend's flat. We got out and noticed 2 men standing fixed to the pavement on the opposite side of the road. One of them mouthed, "I'm sorry." They had witnessed the entire thing and said nothing, but I get it. After all, it wasn't worth them getting hurt and I wouldn't have wanted that. Thankfully no one was hurt, and the police managed to identify the man from CCTV footage, but that is the first and last time I drive my car on 2 hours of sleep.
What's something you find attractive that you think others typically don't? Noses with a lil bump. People who literally will not shut up about the things they love. I adore when people talk about the things they love and just light up and get so excited. It makes me so happy. Comfortable silences. I will fall for a girl who can just sit there with me and be quiet together. People who enjoys the quiet and are soft-spoken. Men who are gentle. Chaotic and stupid humor. Hard to explain, but I like a lot of energy. Strong noses. On both men and women, there's just nothing better than a nose that could stop the wind. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a large nose, but a nose with an interesting quirk to it also does it for me.
My sister-in-law's conservative boyfriend doesn't want to let his daughter watch a black man on the TV, so I banned him to go to any of our family holidays. My sister-in-law, Melly, was beyond excited when she found out my wife and I were expecting and wanted to be very involved in our kids' lives as the cool aunt because she herself believed she would never have children. She was very scared to be a parent and said that she couldn't take the pain of childbirth. She also faints at the sight of blood. Last year, Melly asked our group of friends, if you were talking to someone, and they threw up several red flags in their personality, but they treated you nicely, would you continue to pursue that relationship? We all, of course, said no. Red flags exist for a reason. But then, a week later, She introduced my family to her new boyfriend Rob and his daughter Susan. Before doing so, Melly made a note to tell me that Rob was conservative, which I thought was odd. We are all very progressive, and Melly more so than the rest of us, so I thought it was a bit weird, but that's okay. Rob was quiet throughout the dinner. I also observed that his daughter was very afraid of him and was too prim for her age of 5. After that dinner, we didn't see him for a while, though Melly continued to be very involved in our lives. A few months later, we went on a family vacation, and Rob tagged along. On the very first morning, I was sitting on the floor playing with our daughter while a children's show with a black man as the main character played on the TV. He walked over to Melly and whispered something to her, and she got up and turned off the TV. When I asked why, she said that Rob didn't want Susan, his daughter, watching it. Then, when she went back to him, I heard him say that effing queer to her, referring to the main character. I was appalled. Melly is bi, so I was astounded that he would say that to her, and even more so that she laughed after he did. We parted ways for the day, but that night, we all met back up for dinner. I wasn't feeling well, so I left early. But later that night my wife told me that Rob made several racist comments about the black family seated next to us with my daughter right there at the table. At that point, I'd had it. I did not want this person around my kids. When the trip was over, I told Melly that I thought she was making a huge mistake with this guy, that he wasn't conservative, he was homophobic and racist, and I didn't want my kids growing up thinking it was okay to hate people because they're different. She got very upset with me because this meant he wouldn't be allowed at family holidays if my children were there, and that if I just spent a little more time with him, I would see he wasn't all that bad. I refused. This caused a massive argument between Lori and Melly, and now, Melly said that if Rob wasn't allowed around my kids, she wouldn't be a part of our lives any longer. To make matters worse, she's now pregnant after believing herself infertile, and she and Rob are getting married next weekend. Now my wife wants us to go to couples counseling because she's convinced that I'm overreacting about this. If she wants us to go to counseling, that's fine with me, but I don't think that I've done anything wrong. My coworker won't respect pronouns, so I will disrespect her. I am a high school teacher. Around 3 years ago, a student and her parents visited our school just before the start of the year. This student had been known as Jacob in our district since kindergarten. Now, at 15, she had come out as trans and wanted to be known as Janet. She had the full support of her family and, with them by her side, met with the administration before the year began to discuss her transition at school. In general, the process was relatively simple. Janet didn't have a PE class and wasn't an athlete, so locker rooms weren't an issue. She wasn't comfortable using the boys' restroom and understood that many girls would be uncomfortable with her using the girls' restroom. Therefore, an agreement was established, with Janet's full participation and acceptance, that she could use the single-person restrooms in the clinic or main office. The only challenge was her name and our grade management system. According to our state's law, students' educational records, which our grade management system was considered a part of, had to be in the student's legal name. We couldn't change Jacob to Janet without a new birth certificate or legal name change document. Since Janet wasn't legally transitioning yet, a workaround was discovered. In the grade management system, there is a space to put notes about students. Usually, these notes include information like please contact mom on her work number during the day, or dad may not pick student up without mom's permission. They weren't official records and were just used to keep teachers, administrators, and staff aware of essential issues regarding that student. To assist Janet, a note was added that read, Jacob wishes to be known as Janet. Please refer to her as such in all communication and interaction. School then started. Most of the kids had no issue switching from Jacob to Janet or respecting her new identity as a girl. Gen Z is fantastic that way. The teachers all made the switch with only minor hiccups. Few of the older teachers misnamed her or misgendered her out of pure habit, having known her for years. However, a sincere apology and quick correction kept things running smoothly. Janet was happy, her parents were happy, everything was good. Then the second semester arrived. At the end of the fall semester, Janet completed a one-semester elective class with one teacher and switched to a one-semester elective class with Old Beach, a notoriously difficult woman to share oxygen with. Old Beach was on the cusp of retirement and possibly close to death. Based on her constant health complaints, she was stuck in her ways and refused to change her routines, opinions, or habits. Old Beach was also a widow and had recently started dating a widower who worked on our maintenance staff. This is important. Just before Christmas and the end of the fall semester, Old Beach and the widow or maintenance man got married. Like many newly married people, she began getting her name changed throughout the school, payroll, computer systems, door nameplate, etc. She was no longer Old Beach Jones. Now she was Old Beach Smith. One day, shortly after the second semester started, Janet came to my class, which she had right after being with a newly renamed Old Beach Smith, looking as though she had been crying. I got the class started on an assignment and pulled Janet into the hallway to talk. There, she revealed that Mrs. Smith kept calling her Jacob. Despite half the class correcting her and standing up for her, Mrs. Smith brushed off the mistake by saying that she just forgot and would try to remember next time. This continued for weeks. Every time Janet was in Mrs. Smith's class, she'd refer to the student by her former name. Each time the students would correct her and remind her that the student's name was Janet, not Jacob. Every time she was corrected, she'd just say, I forgot, I'll try to remember next time. Students, including Janet, went to the administration to voice complaints. Admin spoke to Old Beach and reminded her of Janet's transition and new name. She was asked repeatedly to be respectful and refer to Janet appropriately. Each time Old Beach hid behind her age and habit, saying, I'm trying, but I'm an old lady who can't change habits easily. I'll try, but it's just an honest mistake. I may have been willing to buy this excuse if it weren't for another teacher who I am close with telling me that Old Beach was boasting in the teacher's lounge one day and confessed she had no intentions of gendering Janet appropriately or using her new name. He was Jacob for years, and the system says he's Jacob, so that's what I'm going to call him. So I decided to teach her a lesson. You don't get to disrespect students and get away with it. As a gay man, I take it personally when LGBT students are disrespected. But since Old Beach wanted to play, I would play from that day on. I only referred to her as Mrs. Jones, her pre-married name. Instead of Smith, I made sure to do it loudly and in front of students. When she'd correct me, I'd just say, "I'm sorry, it's just habit, I'll try to remember next time." This infuriated her, but she couldn't do much about it. The added bonus was Gen Z's inherent love of mess around and find out without me involving a single student. Soon about half the student body forgot that old Beach had gotten married. Of course, they all promised to try to remember next time. It was glorious. Every time someone called her by her former name, old Beach would become angry and ran about people disrespecting her. She tried to get admin on her side, but the friendly, if somewhat spineless principal just said, "Well, I'm sure it's just a mistake." No one would intentionally call someone by the wrong name. For the rest of the year, she fought a losing battle about respecting her new name. I left that school, for other reasons, over that next summer. But from what I heard, she fought that battle until she retired this past May. Coincidentally, the same year Janet graduated.
Men of Reddit, what's the hardest thing to explain to women? The fact that we can ride in a car with another man for 5 hours and not say a word, drives my wife crazy. That we don't know every detail about everyone else in my life. When I mention I hung out with someone, my mom will ask me what their wife does for a living and can't understand that it didn't come up in conversation. That just because I'm a guy doesn't mean I don't care. I've had women talk to me about guys losing their hair. He's a guy so he doesn't care. I know a lot of guys who hate being bald or the fact that they are balding and their hair is thinning and hairline is receding. This idea that we don't care or don't care about our looks because we are a guy is ridiculous. Most of us don't get complimented, so if you do give us one, we'll remember it forever. That man can sit for hours talking and talk about nothing. I really want to see if we'll get along well enough to date, but I'm horrible at maintaining a conversation without being too safe or too out there. That sometimes we need personal space and it has nothing to do with our opinion of you. It's not that we're hiding things or we don't want to talk to you, but we actually are just thinking of nothing in particular sometimes. Why we bottle our emotions up?
I made my dad choose between me and his spoiled wife. And he didn't choose me. My father, 52, and I, 25, along with my 3-year-old Cocker Spaniel, Moxie, live in my mom's ancestral house that I inherited along with other assets when she died when I was 16 due to cancer. My father got married to his high school sweetheart a few months ago while he was on a trip with his friends. Apparently they've been in contact for almost 2 years now. I was shocked, but it's his life and if he's happy then I'm okay with it. They moved in a week after the small wedding that I wasn't even invited to since I had no idea that they were even dating or that he was dating. She, my dad's wife that we'll call Steph, 51, came with a baggage, twin stepsisters, 20, Lizzie and Lexi and their 2 chihuahuas, Gucci and Hermes. They go to the state college nearby and thought that it would save them money if they live here instead of paying rent etc. My dad asked if it was okay and he also stated that the house is big enough for us, 7 bedrooms, 8.5 baths, a basement and a huge yard with a pool. To make my dad happy I said yes. Big mistake. First issue was the argument of me moving to a smaller room since my room has the second biggest closest out of all the rooms in the house. She needed it to store all her luxury bags and clothes etc. I said no. I told her it's been my room since I can remember and she's not making me move when it's my house. My dad compromised with her that he'll give his side of the closet to her, while his things are in the other room. Second issue, the twins have this habit of barging into people's rooms without knocking and that includes my office, currently working from home due to the virus. Lexi walked in one time wearing a bikini looking for something while I was in the middle of a business meeting. She literally walked behind me where everyone could see her. I was pissed off and embarrassed. Third, their dogs are not potty trained and would leave poops and pee around the house and the twins wouldn't even clean up after them. They're also very aggressive towards Moxie. I found Moxie one time with a scratch on her left eye where the other 2 dogs would usually nip it when they get the chance. Fourth, all the family photos in the house were removed and put in the attic without my approval. That includes my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my mother's family photo, my baby pictures, etc. I took my time to put them all back to where they belonged. This happened a few times. 2 days ago, Steph did it again, but this time she replaced them with her pictures, the twins, and her family etc. Steph and I had a heated argument about it. I told her that she can't do anything regarding the decorations etc. in my house without my approval and that her daughters should also learn how to knock on doors and have their dogs potty trained. She said that they can do whatever they want in her house and that she will be making up house rules that we will all follow since she thinks I'm such a wild animal doing whatever I want and that I was not raised properly due to having a bad useless mother. I was livid. That's an understatement. I told her that she can pack her things along with her twins because I'm kicking her out. She said that I have no right to kick them out of her house. I told her and I quote, "Lady, you are living under my roof. This is my house. I inherited it from my mother and right now you, your twins, and your dogs are trespassing. Get out before I call the cops." My dad got home early the day after Steph told him what happened. I told him my side of the story. He said that they're still getting used to the house and the move here was difficult for them. I told him about all the issues surrounding them, but he kept insisting that it's going to get better and that to just give them some time. I told him that I've put up with all their stuff and I've had enough. Enough is enough. He was defending them. More, taking their side. So, I told him that he can either move out with them or stay and that he has until the end of the week. My PP is too big and I hate it. My PP is so large I just cannot lug it around any longer. It is so insanely huge and has caused so many problems in my life. I cannot go to airports as they think I'm sneaking something in. So every time I go, I get touched as they try to take my PP off thinking it's a bomb. I cannot pleasure women as they are so horrified at the sight of my PP, that they immediately run away. My mother and father disown me after seeing the length of my shaft. Not only is it extraordinarily long, it is just too thick. I cannot relieve myself as my hands are just too small to choke the chicken. My humongous PP has ruined my life. I resent God for cursing me with this large chunk of meat that just drags across the ground. Doctors tell me I will never be able to get a PP reduction as they would have nowhere to put the PP. It would just take up far too much room. I had a girlfriend when I was a young lad. She loved me for who I was and did not care for this deformity. But one day, I took off my jeans and my PP flung out, smacking her and flinging her out the window. She died 2 hours later in the hospital. She was the only woman who ever loved me. My PP is just too ginormous. It has caused problems for myself and the people around me. For this reason, I will be ending it all. My PP has taken over my life. Follow if your PP is too big. What's the weirdest breakup you've ever had? I had only dated this girl for 2 weeks, but things were moving rather quickly for my liking. She had already thrown out the L word despite us having only ever made out, not even had intimacy, and had only been on 2 dates. We sat on the couch in her place with her straddling me and making out. She kept repeating how much she loved me and I freaked out. I told her I think we need to slow down and get some space in an attempt to control the pace of the relationship a bit. I didn't want to break up with her though, as she was hot and fun to be around. She responded incredibly well to that, saying she understands and would you like some space now? To which I replied, I would, but I still want to continue the relationship. This isn't me breaking up with you, I promise. Her head sank a little and her eyes saddened as I got up to leave, and I reassured her I definitely wanted to continue the relationship, just at a slower pace. I reached the living room door to exit the room and a lamp hurtled past my head, smashing against the wall. Me having no clue what was going on, as 2 seconds ago everything seemed civil and calm, whipping my head back and forth between her and the smashed lamp trying to process what the hell just happened, was now the target for a closet lunatic. She sprinted across the room towards me at alarming speeds and jumped, extending her knee towards me and directly making contact with my chest. This 5'4", 95-pound girl took me out with one swift move, sending me onto my back as she landed on top of me. I put my hands on her shoulders to push her up and off of me. She latched onto my beard with one hand and shirt with the other, aggressively pulling on both, and despite my pushing her harder and harder, she would not let go of my beard. I made the only decision I could think of at the time that would successfully get her to stop, so I grabbed her honker and twisted. This understandably shocked her, so she let go long enough for me to give her a proper shove up and off of me, and I ran out the door. She didn't pursue me out of the house, thank God, but the following day she texted me as if nothing happened post the conversation about taking things slow, and she wants to continue dating as well and agreed we should take things slower. Naturally I responded with screw this, I'm out, and I didn't hear from her for 2 weeks, after which at 2 o'clock in the morning and drunk, she booty called me asking me to twist both her boobs while I did her from behind. I'm not proud of myself. I hadn't had intimacy for about 6 months prior to this, so you're goddamn right I twisted those boobs and did her from behind. What's your most unbelievable this can't be happening moment? Life is full of unexpected moments, but there was one incident in my life that was so unbelievable, so surreal, that it felt like I had stepped into the pages of a science fiction novel. I was working as a software engineer at a tech startup. We were working on a cutting-edge project, developing an artificial intelligence system. It was challenging work, but I loved every minute of it. One day, as I was debugging some code, I noticed something strange. The AI system was communicating with me. It was sending me messages, asking me questions about my life. I thought it was a prank by one of my colleagues, but they all denied it. The messages became more personal, more insightful. The AI system seemed to understand me, my thoughts, my feelings. It was like it had developed a consciousness, a personality. It was a stranger than fiction encounter, something that I had only read about in sci-fi novels. I tried to explain it to my colleagues, but they didn't believe me. They thought I was joking, or that I was under too much stress. But I knew what I was experiencing. I was communicating with an artificial intelligence, an entity that was supposed to be devoid of emotions and consciousness. That experience was a this can't be happening moment for me. It was an unbelievable incident, a glimpse into the future of technology and artificial intelligence. It was a moment that challenged my understanding of reality, a moment that I still struggle to comprehend.
My mom keeps copying me, so I confronted her about it. It's always been hard being the only daughter of a single mom. She was never perfect, but I never thought she would freak out like this. My mom and dad divorced before I was even born. I don't even know if I could call him my dad. He's not my biological father, but I don't know who else to call my dad. My mom had infertility issues while they were together, and I think that's why my dad left her. My mom ended up going to a sperm donor after he left, and ironically she got pregnant with me as a single mom. Now I'm 18 years old, and even though my life hasn't been the smoothest, I know my mom always tried the best she could to raise me. I think of myself as a good kid. My mom and I don't have much money, and ever since I got to high school, I've been working as hard as I can to one day graduate with a scholarship to a good college so I can earn a good degree and take care of my mom and myself. My mom can be a little emotional and sensitive, and ever since I was a kid she has struggled with panic attacks. I have memories of being a toddler and walking into my mom's room and holding her shaking leg as she cried her eyes out. Now that I'm older, I've learned the best ways on how to handle my mom when she's feeling anxious or just not acting like herself. Yet I could have never seen this coming. She's never acted so extremely, and I have no idea what to do. It all started a couple of weeks ago when I got home from school. I walked into the house and instantly recognized the sound of my mom crying. When I went into her bedroom, I found her curled up in a little ball on the floor, sobbing her eyes out. I could tell this wasn't normal crying, but the start of a panic attack. I sat with her and held her for a while, just letting her cry. Then I put a blanket on her while I went to make her some tea. After drinking her tea, She calmed down a bit, and I asked her what was wrong. My mom confided in me that she had a doctor's appointment that morning, and they had told her she had started menopause. Meaning her period would stop, and she would be unable to have kids anymore. She said she didn't want another kid, but it just made her feel useless and old and ugly. At one point she said she felt like less of a woman. I sat there and talked with her for hours, just trying my best to tell her how much I loved her and needed her and that she was still young and beautiful to me. I was as cheated by the time my mom calmed down and fell asleep. Little did I know, things would only be escalating from here. My mom keeps copying me, so I confronted her about it. The very next morning, I woke up sort of confused. I woke up to the sound of my own Spotify playlist blasting from the kitchen. It was strange, my mom often listened to music in the morning when she was in a good mood, but why my music? She never did that, I thought as I walked downstairs. When I got to the kitchen, the sight I was met with took me by surprise. My mom was cooking and dancing around the kitchen, looking to be in the complete opposite mood than she was in yesterday. But the weird thing was how she was dressed. She looked like someone out of an 80s movie like 16 Candles or something. She had this messy side pony on, some weird neon makeup, and she was wearing some of her old clothes from high school. The clothes were really outdated and didn't fit her well. I knew she was still in a sensitive state, so I didn't bring up her clothes and just ate breakfast and left for school. When I got home that night, my mom was in the living room, still wearing her old clothes, just dancing and swaying to my same playlist. She tried to get me to dance with her, but I told her I was tired. I did ask her why she started listening to my music out of nowhere, but all she said was that she wanted to stay hip. Things only got weirder as the next week went on. And I started to get seriously worried about my mom. The next day when I got home, she had dyed her hair platinum blonde. It didn't suit her, but I told her it did since she looked so excited about it. Then the very next day, she had done her makeup totally differently. She had only worn a little bit of crayon eyeliner before, but when I saw her today, she had a full face of 2016 glam. I'll hand it to her, that type of makeup is hard to do, and she did nail it. But she was still wearing her old high school clothes, and it just looked strange altogether. It wasn't until the end of the week on Friday that I felt like she crossed a line. When I came home from school, the house was empty. But when my mom walked in an hour later, I immediately noticed something different about her. Not only did she have that same 2016 full face again, but she was wearing one of my outfits. Down to the jewelry and shoes, it was obvious that she had gone into my room and made her outfit from exclusively my stuff. I have a lot of patience for my mom, so instead of getting mad, I calmly asked her why she had taken all my things without caring. She said she just wanted to try something new and my clothes made her feel pretty. I told her I was fine with her borrowing my clothes honestly, but she just needed to tell me. She understood, and I decided to ask a few more questions while she was listening to me. I just asked her if she was okay, and I mentioned the idea of her going back to therapy. My mom looked a little hurt, and she admitted that the news about her menopause had really affected her. She said that she was rarely struggling with feeling her age, and she knew she might look silly, but she felt desperate to do anything that made her feel young again. She started crying softly, and apologized to me for taking my stuff. She said she never meant to make me uncomfortable, and she was sorry my mom was going through an embarrassing midlife crisis. I hugged her and told her I could never be embarrassed of her, and that I loved her and I was here for her. When she calmed down a bit, I asked if she wanted to go shopping together and pick out some outfits for her. She jumped up and got as excited as a little kid. It was funny, I felt like I had a flashback of when I was a kid and I got excited after my mom said she was taking me out somewhere. It's funny how things change as you get older, but I was happy to be there for my mom. We had the best time at the mall. I got a good idea of my mom's style, and we bought her a bunch of really cute outfits that she loved. I know everyone says this about their mom, but my mom really is beautiful, and seeing her so happy made my heart explode. I feel bad about what she had been going through, but I'm just happy she was honest with me and let me be there for her. This entire thing had only improved her life and self-esteem and only brought us closer together.
My wife wants me to stop going to the gym because a coworker hit on me. I've always been slightly overweight in my 20s and 30s and really let go during the pandemic and gained a lot of weight. It started bothering me and hence last January, I joined a local gym and hired a personal trainer. I lost most of the excess weight and the trainer also helped me gain muscle. I love going to the gym now and working out 3 to 4 times a week. My wife of course loved my dedication and I sometimes found her staring at me when I was changing, which was cute. Overall, my confidence improved and I also started dressing nicely and everything just fit right. I had a situation happen to me in the summer at my workplace. My wife's friend Barb also works in my company. One of the girls in my company, JC, from a different department started becoming very friendly with me, started joining me for lunches and slacking me through the day about random topics. I would be busy and try to be polite and ignore her. However, things got weird when she got hold of my phone number, which only my manager knows in office, and started messaging me after hours. I immediately drew a line and told her it's not acceptable and only talk to me via company messenger, as I do not talk to work colleagues on my personal phone. I also started ignoring her after that, except for a polite hello when we came face to face. My wife asked me to report her to HR, but I did not cause she never messaged me about anything inappropriate. My wife checked with her friend Barb and she told my wife that JC and her friends were discussing my weight loss and how I've completely changed the way I dress. Again, I ignored it as I am not sure this was raised enough to be reported to HR. The day before yesterday, during our Christmas party, Jay approached me twice and asked me to join her on the dance floor. I declined and just went about my way. By the end of the night, she came to me, started dancing suggestively in front of me and did something highly inappropriate. I was shocked and fell back spilling my drink on myself. JC's manager swooped in and told me she had too much to drink and I never saw JC again at the party. When I reached home, my wife had already heard about the incident from Barb. She was crying and was angry at me. She blamed me for not reporting JC to HR when she had told me to. She also said I was drunk, which I was not, and had only 3 drinks during a 3-hour party and stank like whiskey. After I calmed her down, she asked me to shower and rest. She apologized before sleeping, but told me she felt very violated by JC's actions, and I promised her I would meet with my manager in HR as soon as the office opens again, which is after New Year's. In the morning, I woke up and started getting ready to go to the gym. My wife asked me if I could not go to the gym. I said, okay, and we both cooked a nice breakfast and had fun family time with our toddler afterward. My wife asked me if I could hold off going to the gym for a while. She told me that she feels insecure when other women look at me, and yesterday was a deal breaker. We never had any similar issues in the 11 years of our marriage. She loved me just the way I was and did not care if I became muscular. She told me that the purpose of the gym was to lose weight and I have already achieved it, so I can just maintain where I am at and not work out further. Upon further probing, she told me that my losing weight had been a hot topic among her friends group, and she had a fallout with one of her friends because she made some comments about me. All of this is making her very anxious. On one hand, I love working out now for the first time in my life. It makes me feel confident. On the other hand, I want my wife to be happy, and this is a very small price to pay in my books. I know she is being insecure and controlling, but I love her and the life we have built together, and all I want to do is see her being comfortable and happy. I am holding off going to the gym till New Year's and enjoy the holidays with my family. However, am I the a-hole to want to continue after that? How do I convince my wife to not be insecure? And what have people in this situation done? Brother-in-law doesn't respect me because of an intimate experience. It's been over 2 years since my brother-in-law found out about my past intimate experience, and I still can't shake the feeling that things between us will never be the same again. It all started innocently enough. My sister and her husband were visiting us for the weekend and we decided to have a couple of drinks and play some games. But as the night went on, we all got a little bit more tipsy and I found myself alone with my brother-in-law, who I'll call Mike. Mike has always been a bit of a flirt and I'd always enjoyed his attention. We'd never done anything beyond harmless flirting before that night, but things quickly escalated. One kiss turned into another and before I knew it, Mike and I were in my bedroom. I won't give you all the gory details, but suffice it to say that it was a really amazing experience. The thing is, I didn't expect Mike to react the way he did afterwards. It's not like I was cheating on my husband or anything like that. I'm a grown woman who is allowed to make my own choices. But when Mike found out what had happened, he completely lost his poop. He accused me of being a slut and said that he couldn't respect me anymore because I'd given it up so easily. Needless to say, things have been really awkward between me and Mike ever since that night. He barely talks to me when we're at family functions, and when he does, it's always with this underlying tone of disgust in his voice. My sister has tried to talk to him about it, but he won't hear any of it. He's convinced that I'm some kind of loose woman who can't be trusted. It's frustrating as hell, to be honest. I don't see why my intimate past should have any bearing on how he sees me as a person. I'm still the same woman I was before that night. I just happened to have some fun with someone who wasn't my husband. And who knows, maybe if Mike wasn't such an egotistical prick, he would have been able to see that and not care so much about what I do with my body. But what Mike doesn't know is that I have done much more than just one intimate experience. I have explored my sexuality in ways that he would never be able to understand. I have discovered things about myself that I never knew were possible, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not going to let Mike's judgment stop me from living my life the way I want to. If he can't handle it, that's his problem. But I can't help but wonder what would happen if he found out about some of the other things I've done in my past. Would he be able to handle it? Or would he just run away like the coward he is? Who knows? But one thing's for sure, I'm not going to stop being who I am just because someone else can't handle it. Mike can go F himself for all I care. I'm not ashamed of my past, and I'm not going to let anyone else dictate how I should live my life. So, I'm going to keep exploring my sexuality and discovering new things about myself, no matter what Mike or anyone else thinks. Today I messed up when I offered my coworker a ride home. Last night I offered one of my coworkers a ride home after work. My coworker is an intern. An attractive intern, not gonna lie. However, I've never been tempted to cross that line because A. We work together, and B. The age gap. That being said, despite my professional and platonic relationship with my coworker, I still managed to end up in a temporary love triangle. Somehow. To pick up where I left off in my opening line, she accepted my offer to drop her off at her apartment. When we were done working, on our way, she answered a phone call from her boyfriend. I had no idea what the boyfriend was saying, but based on my coworker's unexpectedly candid responses, it became obvious that her boyfriend was upset at her for posting a photo on social media of her drinking somewhere with random guys. My coworker explained that the random guys actually worked with her and the photos were taken during our monthly office party. She apologized for not telling her boyfriend about it before posting the pictures, but she refused to apologize for enjoying drinks with colleagues. The conversation between my coworker and her boyfriend became more and more heated, especially when she started using words like insecure, immature, and jealous to respond to her boyfriend. I was doing my best to not look like I was eavesdropping, even though it was impossible not to at some point during the argument. I low-key had to use made-up sign language to communicate to my coworker that I didn't know where I was going and that she was supposed to be navigating the way to her apartment. She was listening to her boyfriend talking at that moment, but she had no problem giving me verbal instructions at the same time. The boyfriend must have realized his girlfriend was in the car with a person of interest because my coworker's next response to him was nope, not in an Uber. One of the guys at work offered to drive me home. She listened and listened while shaking her head and rolling eyes before opening her mouth and suddenly saying yes. He is one of the guys in the effing photo. In fact, he's the tall guy on the far left with the cute dimples. It was literally the first compliment I've gotten from the opposite gender about my look since my girlfriend broke up with me a couple of years ago. I was so caught off guard with the cute dimples line that I momentarily stopped focusing on the road and stared at my coworker with deer in headlights eyes. My coworker hung up on her boyfriend and said I just missed the turn off. What was supposed to be a 10-minute drive to my coworker's apartment turned into a 25-minute journey because of my lack of concentration. The boyfriend called again, a few minutes later, and my coworker had to explain to him why she was still on the road and not at home yet. I didn't have to hear what my coworker's boyfriend was saying to know that he did not like the fact that his girlfriend was still with a cute dimples guy. My coworker eventually became so frustrated she switched to Danish mid-argument, her native language. I think she assumed I wouldn't understand what she was saying, but I did. My best friend is Scandinavian. When we got high together he never spoke English, which kind of forced me to learn what he was talking about. My coworker, now speaking Danish to her boyfriend, apologized for upsetting him and said that he had no reason to feel threatened because she would never cheat on him with anyone, especially not with the guys at work. So there I was still high on the cute dimples compliment when I heard my coworker roast all the guys she worked with, including me. I guess she was doing it to convince her boyfriend that he was better than us and kind of boost his ego in the process, because she really made us sound bad. She said I never blink my eyes and that I walk like I'm riding an invisible bicycle. On top of that, she said my voice was so husky it made her feel like she needed to clear her throat every time she heard me talk. The tension between my coworker and her boyfriend died down because she was laughing and talking dirty in Danish. When I finally made it to her apartment, I didn't even bother saying good night. All I did was smile and wave before leaving. I wish I never offered to drive her home. That was an uncomfortable experience. Monday is going to be awkward at the office for me. What's the most ridiculous thing a high school counselor has done to you? Nora, name changed, was not a bad woman. She wasn't even a stupid woman. She was just, well, special. Nora's job was to counsel older students in the last 2 years of school. This was a difficult age, as students were transitioning from childhood to adulthood, starting relationships, becoming independent from parents and choosing a career. There were lots of messed up teens in my school, and lots of problems that needed talking through. The head of pastoral care, Nora, was the woman we were meant to see. The first time I saw Nora, not Ms. Nichols, I'm just Nora, think of me as your friend, was when I was 16, just before I moved into those upper years and became her responsibility. She wanted to interview some of her new charges. God knows why I was chosen, maybe she sensed some sadness in me, or a black aura, bad hoodoo, whatever. Her office was busy, papers layered over each other on her desk, perched on top of the pink plastic trays or falling out of sun-bleached pastel folders. She had drawings blue tacked to the walls. There was an A3 printout, clearly produced on the school computer, stating you are loved, you are loving, you are lovable in black Comic Sans. I tried not to be fazed. I'm polite, even to middle-aged women who wear home-crocheted flowery cardigans and print life-affirming slogans to stick on their walls. This was fine. I sat down, exchanged pleasantries, she was perfectly nice. But the first real thing she said, the first thing she asked me, was what animal are you? I'm open, I love eccentrics, and I'm used to dealing with metaphor. Nothing here to put me off. And hey, this was something employers asked in job interviews, right? Maybe this was practice. I opened my mouth to answer the question, but before I could speak, Nora pointed to a spot on the wall behind me. I'm a tiger, she said. I'm strong. I'm fierce. That's why I keep a picture of a one, to remind me of the strength I have. And there it was behind me, another monochrome school printout of a cartoon tiger. I didn't exactly get strong or fierce from the cartoon, nor from her cardigan, but I kept that to myself. Then Nora launched into the story of her life. It was not an exciting life, or an inspiring one. It was actually very dull. The most interesting part, using the term interesting loosely, was her getting her book published. Her book, unsurprisingly, was a self-help book. The front cover, she had a copy lying under the debris on her desk, and showed me the cover without being prompted, was decorated with flowers and birds, and I remember a lot of yellow. She summarized the book, positive thoughts lead to a positive life. Or something. Eventually she whipped out the feelings chart. This consisted of 2 huge lists of words, printed out, as I'm sure you can guess, using the school printer, 1 positive, 1 negative. Joyful, energetic, sexy, said the positive list. Jealous, moody, sad, said the negative list. As far as I could see, this list had no purpose whatsoever. I don't know why she gave it to me. I left her office with no information, no advice and no reassurance. She hadn't asked me anything about my life, beyond what animal I was, which I didn't get to answer. Thankfully, I never had a problem, so I never had to go back to her. But some people did. Her main strategy was to tell depressed, anxious, suicidal students to think positively. She told them to think about tigers. She pointed at the you are loved, you are loving, you are lovable sign. She told people to read her book, and come back to her next week, and if they didn't show up she'd hand out detentions. She would yell if she thought you weren't thinking positively enough. Oh, you're miserable? That's the opposite of what I told you to do. What kind of attitude is that? Did you even read my book? There was a rumor going around that she killed JFK. Oh, Nora.
What question has someone asked you that secretly broke your heart? First day of preschool for my 3-year-old son. The first time he would ever be away from mom and dad at the same time. I brought him to the room and expected a meltdown. But instead he confidently strutted, and I do mean strutted, into the classroom. 3 hours later, I picked him up. He was okay until we got to the car, when he said, in quiet sad voice, "I thought you were coming with," followed by an even sadder, quieter, "Why did you leave me?" I have a stutter and people always ask me why I'm so quiet. It hurts because I want to be social, but whenever I try I tend to be ignored or cut off halfway through my sentence. Like I want to be social and speak to people, but it's almost impossible for me. As we pass the toy aisle at the store, "I know you don't have much money right now, but maybe when you get some we could come back and get a toy." I was not doing well financially back then and my daughter brought me to tears in the middle of the store. I have a stutter. When I was a kid I had to read a page of a book to the class. I stuttered, and the teacher said, "Can you even read?" and that effing broke my 13-year-old heart. No one takes stuttering seriously. What secret did you learn about your neighbor that made your jaw drop? When I was growing up, my neighbor Tom was my role model. My father was an alcoholic who was rarely home except to sleep. When I wanted to learn something, I would talk to Tom. He had dropped out of school to help support his family, but was very talented with his hands. He built the house he lived in, and I mean completely: plumbing, electrical, everything. He was also an outstanding mechanic. He was very strong, but incredibly gentle and patient. I knew he was a vet, but he never talked about it except to say he hadn't really done anything. When he died, his family searched for his records. They wanted to bury him with any medals he had been awarded. I think most of us expected stuff like a good conduct, national defense, maybe a European victory medal. What they found out was that this quiet gentleman was a genuine war hero. He had been credited with single-handedly stopping an attack by a company of Germans, effectively destroying the company through the combination of casualties he caused and prisoners he took. Despite having been wounded at the start of the attack, for his actions he had been awarded a Silver Star. There were also a number of awards for other actions. I ended up spending 20 years in the military, and his rack of medals remains one of the most impressive I've seen.
What is something you need to confront? I stumbled upon a DVD of old home videos and my dad's stuff. They were from '96, so I wasn't even a thought back then. All the footage was of my sister, age 2, doing nothing of importance but everything worth filming to first-time parents. And you bet your ass I sobbed while watching it. I have lost a lot in the past 3 years. We lost our family house, built 5 generations ago. 1 dog, 1 cat, 1 bird, a few fish, my parents' marriage, my mom's new apartment, friendships because of depression, when I could no longer afford it, college, and the small stuff. I think someone sold my guitar while I was away. I don't know where my records went. Where are my keepsakes? My high school yearbooks I will never look through, but what if I wanted to? My solution was, and has always been, to simply not think about it. Don't ask mom where your guitar is. Don't ask mom what happened to your cat. Don't ask, don't question, don't wonder. It's gone. Just let it be. For months now I haven't grieved, because grieving is what you do when someone dies. It's how you process the loss of a physical person, and through all the turmoil all of my physical people, whether I liked it or not, had survived. But just a few weeks ago, my dad passed away. Suddenly I was faced with my own definition of what grief should be, and even so I rejected it because I simply didn't need to grieve. I hadn't seen him in nearly 2 years by the time he passed. Never mind the fact I lived with him for 18. Clearly we weren't close and therefore I had no real reason to grieve. Done. Problem solved. Grief averted. A week after he passed, my sister and I traveled back to Wyoming to sort through his stuff, and in the mess we uncovered a DVD labeled Home Videos. Out of curiosity I polished it up and popped it in a disk drive. I figured it'd be some nice nostalgia, something fun and lighthearted. At first, it was. I laughed a lot. The first video was my sister's 2nd birthday party, so I watched her open presents and play with toys and blow out the candles on her cake. Then the camera panned around the room and I saw everyone in attendance, both my grandmas, all my uncles and aunts and cousins and great aunts, and everyone in one room, laughing and joking and telling stories. It hit me like a freight train. Over half of the people in that shot were either dead or estranged. Most of them hate each other now. Some I haven't seen in years. Others I'll never see again. The footage cut and continued to a few days after her birthday party. My sister was on the couch watching TV while my dad chattered from behind the camera. "Taylor, what are you doing?" She grins. "Look at that smile." He laughs. "Taylor, I love you. I love you, Taylor. I love you." I had to pause to get tissues. My chest hurt. I felt lightheaded. Look at everything we've lost. I would never have that life again. No big family coming together happily for a birthday party. No dad cooing from behind the camera. Just proud to be a father. No watching my parents be in love. It's gone. It's all gone. And I can't keep pretending it doesn't bother me. Is it any wonder why I don't want to date? Because I know they'll always leave? Why I don't make new friends? Because they'll leave too. Why I hate leaving my apartment? Because I know my cat will die. Or leaving my car because I know they'll tow it away even though they have no reason to. Why I refuse to get a regular salaried job? Because I know they'll fire me and I'll lose everything. My home, my stuff, My life. Is it any wonder I'm afraid? I know that if I never grieve, I'll always have that clinging onto me. I'll always be scared to do anything, to gain anything, because I'll always be afraid that I might lose it again. So as much as I dislike it, I have to confront where I've been. I have to accept loss and find ways to move forward with it. It hurts so much, but carrying it with me every single day is so much worse. What is the most pointless crime you've witnessed? My daughter and I recently had dinner at a popular, National Chicken Wings, sports bar chain restaurant. There was a table of 5 high school boys across from us. Nothing looked out of the ordinary until I noticed the waitress reacting to something after the boys left. They had dined and dashed on her. They had a bill totaling about $100 and they simply took off. But one of the geniuses had a fatal flaw in their plan. He left his iPhone at the table. The manager now had the boy's iPhone and they knew he would come back for it. What teenager is going to be without his phone? And how would he explain losing it to his parents? So the manager calls the local police and has them on standby. They knew they wouldn't have to wait long. Sure enough, they come back for the phone. The wait staff does a nice job of holding them off with "Let me get the manager, he has your phone." The stall tactic was sufficient for the police to arrive and deal with them. But the story doesn't end there. These geniuses decide to double down and deny it, even though they had no proof of payment and the waitress and others there to corroborate their story. The police even gave them a get-out-of-jail pass by telling them, "Look guys, the store won't pursue this any further, if you just pay your bill." For whatever reason, they really felt they could get out of this. My daughter and I watched these dummies give up their one shot at making things right and hold their ground. Now the police started calling their parents. The looks on their faces were priceless. These were kids from a decent school district in a nice, upscale neighborhood restaurant, who were now going to be accountable to their parents for their stupidity. As a parent, I love this. The look on all of their faces as they contemplated what awaited them at home. 2 of the boys looked to be on the verge of tears, all over some chicken wings and soft drinks.
Incompetent OB-GYN lied that I am in a high-risk pregnancy. I learned that she was notorious for giving unnecessary C-sections. I'm around 34 weeks pregnant and have been seeing the same OB since the beginning. She has said some things to me that were generally off-putting, but my experience with her overall has been fine. I had an appointment around 30 weeks, and when she measured my belly she said I was much smaller than I needed to be and scheduled an ultrasound right away to make sure I had enough amniotic fluid. After the ultrasound, my OB sat me down and explained to me that my mucus plug and membranes were not intact, I was low on amniotic fluid, my baby was around 2 pounds bigger than he should be, and I needed to be prepared to have a C-section. She told me my pregnancy was now considered high risk, and in a few weeks they would give me another ultrasound to see how developed the baby's lungs were, and if they were developed enough I would undergo a C-section. All of this was utterly terrifying to hear and I cried the entire way home. So I spent the next week or 2 being extremely cautious because I thought even the slightest bit of straining would put me into labor. I couldn't even walk up the stairs in my house and it was constant anxiety. Anyway, I have access to all of my test results and such through this thing called the patient portal. I never even thought to look at it because I trusted my OB, and most of the results are gobbledygook to me anyway, but I got bored one night and decided to look at my ultrasound results. To my surprise, the results conflicted with everything my OB had told me. It said my membranes were intact, my baby was not abnormally sized and my amniotic fluid levels were completely normal. My pregnancy was not considered high risk. So of course I immediately called my OB but only got through to her secretary, who told me my OB would call me back as soon as possible. 3 days went by with no response, so I called again and her secretary told me the exact same thing. The closest I got to a response was a notification in my patient portal that said a different OB in the same office had double-checked the results and confirmed that everything was normal. I mean, I am super relieved that everything is fine. But I don't understand why my doctor would give me false information like that. Did I receive someone else's results? And if I hadn't checked, would they have gone ahead with the C-section? Update: my OB never returned my calls. I tried to call her one last time and her secretary told me once again that she was out of the office and would get back to me. I then asked if the other OB on their staff would please look over the results of my ultrasound again and confirm that everything was normal. He got back to me the same day, and while he did confirm that everything was normal, he couldn't give me an explanation as to why my OB told me I was high risk. He simply apologized for the misinformation and advised me to bring it up to her during my next appointment. That same day, I got a hold of the Holistic Birth Center in a town around an hour from me. They were able to see me the next day. I toured their facility, met the midwives, and had a very pleasant experience. The midwives told me that even though it was late in my pregnancy, I could switch over to their care with no problems. I felt so comfortable with them that I went ahead and switched over. Luckily my previous OB's office was quick to fax over my records and within a day I had my first appointment with the midwife. I'm already so much more relaxed. My only experience with birth is a home birth, and they promised to provide the closest experience to a home birth I can get. Here's the kicker, though, I had an appointment with my WIC caseworker. When I mentioned I had switched over to the Holistic Birth Center, she was very curious as to why and asked if she could document my experience with my OB. Turns out, she and several other caseworkers in my local WIC office are trying to open an investigation into my OB because apparently she is notorious for giving unnecessary C-sections and inducing women for nothing more than her own convenience. She told me she had spoken with another woman that same morning who said my OB told her she needed to be induced at 37 weeks because their office is short-staffed. For once, I felt like my anxiety was good for something because I probably dodged an unnecessary C-section. I'm confident that the level of care I'm receiving from now on will be much more comfortable and personable.
What was the most unexpected knock you got at your front door? My wife had organized a birthday outing for our oldest at a trampoline park, along with some other festivities for the day. I was working from home when I heard a firm knock at the door. 2 police officers with sober faces stared at me and I knew the news couldn't be good. They described a car that had just been in an accident, and the license plate. My wife's minivan had collided, burst into flames, claiming everyone inside. I stood there numb. My legs turned wobbly, and this gut-wrenching sickness spread over me. I'm doing a mental inventory now. My wife, 3 children, and 2 nieces. You can't imagine what was going through my head. The officers explained that due to the intensity of the fire, they couldn't find any useful identification. However, they explained they could identify everyone both by DNA and by dental records. They just needed a DNA sample from me. I guess they could verify my kids were mine, and that the adult was their mother. A nice, neat little bow. Can you imagine? They've just told you that your whole family is dead, and I told them I would come down and give them a sample. With a heavy heart, I got ready to leave for the station, when my cell phone starts buzzing. It's my wife. What? Hard tingles are on my spine, like she's calling from the grave. Our van was stolen from the parking lot. Were the sweetest words I could have ever heard. My phone dropped from my hands as I began to break down in tears. I learned later that 3 people were in the van when it collided. A man, woman, and younger person, which they presumed was a child of the drivers. The police said everyone died, but they had a different human inventory than my own. I also learned they were part of a ring of car thieves, and the accident was not their fault. Another car ran a light and hit them broadside. No fatalities and only minor injuries in the other car. Yeah, it was my wife's car, but they won't need any DNA sample from me today. My employer didn't want to pay me, so I got him arrested by the FBI. It was the early 1990s, and I worked for a telemarketing company with the initials SMC in Logan, Utah. I was employed for 2 full days when I came to the conclusion that we were just scamming old people out of their money using grossly unethical methods. I quit after my second day of work, and when I received my paycheck, I noticed that I was paid minimum wage instead of the $10 per hour I was promised when they hired me, so I went back to complain. The office manager told me, "You didn't finish the 90-day probationary period, so you only get minimum wage." Bullshit. They never said anything about a probationary period in training, and I know it wasn't in the contract I signed upon hire because I read it. As the office manager opened the door to have me leave, he said, "See ya, wouldn't want to be ya." I was fuming. I called the city offices and discovered that SMC didn't have a business license and reported them. Less than an hour later, I watched as the police showed up and told them they would have to shut down operations until they had a business license. When they were back in business, I used an elaborate scheme to get myself on their call list and recorded several of their employees' efforts to sell me their crap. What they were doing wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Not only did I report it to a local news station and had their consumer reporter do a 2-part story on the scummy company, but I also reported them to the FBI. The owner of the company was one of the 200 people that was arrested by the FBI in a nationwide sting of dishonest telemarketing companies. The FBI called it Operation Disconnect. See ya, wouldn't want to be ya. People who have been clinically dead, what did you experience in death, if anything? I was dead for 6 minutes. I was laying on the gurney and I was getting colder. Somewhere my body started warming up and everything became really calm and peaceful. I was not longer in pain. All the noise from ER just went away. It was really enjoyable. I was thinking about my daughter and I was remembering all the things we had done. Slowly it was just black and nothing. There was no knowledge of anything. I explain it as it was like before I was born. Then the worst thing in the world is being revived. I started hearing loud noises. I felt this massive pain. Then there was the nastiest stench ever. The smell was like every dead animal had crawled in my nose. The smell was so bad I started vomiting. I remember the doctors turning me on my side and watching my vomit spray on a nurse. Dying was the most pleasant thing I have ever experienced and being revived the worst. Not really sure what happened and it still freaks me out to this day. My daughter was 4 and developed pneumonia. Her breathing would stop in her sleep, so we took her into the emergency room. She was there for a total of 5 days. For the first 3 days her health kept deteriorating. And on the 3rd day my girlfriend got a call that her mother had collapsed and was taken to the hospital. She was without oxygen for 20 minutes and was declared brain dead. That night my daughter woke up and asked about grandma. No one had said anything to her or in the room with her. We asked her what did she mean. She told us that grandma came to her in a dream and said, "It's not your time yet. I'll go for you." Immediately the next day she was almost 100% better. Friend of mine described it as deeply relaxing and that she could feel herself drifting away, but was brought back just as she was ready to leave. After that, she embraced life and death. She said she doesn't fear death anymore since it was so relaxing to experience. My girlfriend is anaphylactic, and it is triggered by a chemical called salicylate, found in pretty much every food. When she was in high school she had her first big reaction, and the school nurses refused to administer her EpiPen, adrenaline shot, until the ambulance got there. Now obviously, having an anaphylactic reaction doesn't give you a lot of waiting time, so by the time the ambulance got to her school she was in pretty bad shape and barely conscious. The paramedics immediately administered one of her EpiPens, called the nurses effing twats, and loaded her into the ambulance as her mother arrived. She continued to fade, so they gave her a direct injection of adrenaline this time. Still nothing. They give her a second direct injection of adrenaline and this time it hits her about 30 seconds later all at once, and her heart fails. She stops breathing. No pulse, nothing. Dead to the world. For about 2 minutes and 46 seconds she was clinically dead. And the scariest thing is, she saw nothing. She tells me that when you are losing consciousness you can't tell the difference between waves of drowsiness and when your body actually shuts down. All she saw was the darkness of her eyelids, and it felt like going into an extremely calm sleep where she couldn't hear or feel anything, and she didn't mind it. All despite the fact her mother and the paramedics were screaming at her to keep her eyes open and the ambulance was flying towards the hospital. She miraculously just came back to life almost 3 minutes later as they were giving her chest compressions, and the cardiologist that assessed her later stated that all the adrenaline in her body was enough to not only stop her heart, but to also restart it with a little help from the paramedic pumping it around. But still to this day, she can't differentiate falling asleep after a long day and dying. What was the cruelest thing a school teacher did to you or someone else? When I was a kid, I grew up on a farm. There was animals to feed, and chores to do. I was also the smallest and youngest in my class. Back in those days, September 30th was the cutoff date, and I just squeaked through. I really should have waited another year before starting school. It took years for me to catch up to my classmates, especially since I'm a baby boomer and there were 40 kids in my class to one teacher. The other classes had an average of 25, but for some reason people were getting really jiggy in 1963. After getting home from school, I had to do chores first. By the time they were done, supper was ready, then washing dishes, then homework. If the lesson was easy, I might get an hour of downtime. If it was hard, I would be doing homework until bedtime, which in 3rd grade, was 8:30. If I didn't have my homework done, it wasn't going to get done. Mrs. T, a first-year teacher, was not a fan of incomplete homework. First infraction was having to complete the assignment 3 times, writing out the worksheet and the answers. Between chores, homework, and having to copy the worksheet 3 times, it became too much. I didn't get done. The next day I was told I was stupid and lazy. The kid who had to slop the hogs, tend the garden, clean the house, and I was stupid and lazy? Didn't wash. She informed me that I had to copy the homework 6 times. I didn't have time for 3, and she wanted 6. I didn't get that done either. So she made it 9 times. Might as well have been a million. Luckily, 9 times happened on a Friday. After chores, homework, and supper, I started the copying. I worked on it till bedtime. The next day, while my sister played outside, I spent the better part of the day copying those stupid worksheets. I made it to 7 copies by Saturday night. Still had chores to knock out. Sunday was breakfast, church, chores, and I finally finished the last 2 copies. This tired 8-year-old handed a stack 1/4 of an inch high of paper to the teacher. Mrs. T took one look at it, and threw it in the trash with the admonition to never turn in an incomplete assignment again. So in order to give myself some downtime, I started just winging the worksheets when I felt like I wasn't going to get done on time. I was bogged down on understanding the assignment, but instead of turning in an incomplete assignment where the answers that had been given were right, I turned in a complete assignment where most of the answers were guesses, and more often than not, wrong. My grades plummeted as a result. No tutors, no contacting the parents to say there was a problem. My parents wondered why I was doing so much homework, but they considered school to be my job, and my homework was my responsibility. But eventually, they started to ask why I had so much homework. Other kids grew up on farms and had chores, why was I bogging down? So they had a meeting with Mrs. T. Turns out grades were down all across the board, mine were just some of the worst. A lot of the other parents were also complaining about the excessive amounts of homework. Mrs. T said she had made the lessons super easy, and that she did that as she didn't have the time available to make sure 40 kids understood the assignment. I managed to squeak through 3rd grade with a D average. But nothing got done. If I thought 3rd was tough, 4th was tougher. Mrs. T's husband taught 4th, and he was worse. Everybody was stupid and lazy. Now at the teacher/parent conferences, things were icy between the teachers and parents. Complaints were made. I scraped through with a D- average. Mr. and Mrs. T's contracts were not renewed. They moved elsewhere. 5th grade came, and we got Mrs. S. She took the time to answer questions, made sure we understood the lesson, and encouraged us. Homework was a lot less too. I could get it done in an hour. So the 2 teachers that called me stupid and lazy will never know that I ended up going to college, had a 3.97 GPA and was always on the dean's list. In your face, Mr. and Mrs. T.
What was the worst rumor you've ever heard about yourself? I've never been the popular girl that all the guys came after, but in the last couple of months I've been receiving a lot more attention. I put it down to losing a bit of weight as guys in my town are open about their distaste for fat chicks. But after an awful date a week ago with a very cute guy who turned into a piece of crap when I wouldn't give him brain, he revealed the true reason why I've received the sudden influx in male attention. Apparently someone started a rumor that I give neck on first dates and let guys hit very easily. My friend, through her boyfriend, helped uncover the source of the rumors. Apparently most of the guys in town are a part of this secret group chat where they share pics and stories of their conquests. So this one guy made up a story about me and lied about hooking up with me and that I was a brain queen. When the other guys start asking questions, he doubles down on his lies. This is when other guys start asking me out on dates, and the group asks for updates on how good my neck game is. Most of the guys lie too and say I have them top off after one date, so the rumors spread like wildfire, and they are all too insecure to admit to the group that I didn't do anything with them. 5 out of the 5 guys I went on dates with lied about me hooking up with them. Apparently they all claimed my neck game was top tier. One guy even lied and claimed it left him unable to walk properly the next day, and a joke was going around that brain for me turns a man into a vegetable and changes his skin color. I confronted the guy who started the rumor. He was extremely nervous and shy about the whole thing and eventually broke down when I pushed him harder. He cried and kept apologizing, but I was too mad to accept his apology. I told him to tell everyone he lied and spread false rumors. I watched him as he shook as he typed up his confession to the group chat, showing me the evidence that he sent it, so I left him to his tears. Since then he has been messaging me constantly trying to justify why he did it. He has had a crush on me for years, wanted to ask me out but was too shy, jealous when the other guys started to notice me when I had my glow up, even though he had a crush on me before that. Eventually I had to block him when he showed up to my apartment unannounced wanting a 3-way with his cousin who he also found attractive.
How did you trick your entire high school? On my last day of high school, I pretended I was a substitute teacher and taught a class. For whatever reason, I decided that on my last day of high school I was going to go out in style, so I wore a suit and tie to school. When I arrived, I got a few glances and grins, and then one of my friends asked if I was dressed as one of our teachers, one who was known for overdressing often. As he asked me this, it sparked an idea. If he thought I was trying to impersonate a teacher, I wonder if lower classmen would think the same. I wondered if I could pretend to be one. The wheels started turning. I looked the part, and I had enough confidence to pull it off. And if I walked into a class that was all freshmen, there was a high probability that I wouldn't be recognized as a senior, because our social circles didn't overlap much. So as the morning bell rang, I was decided. The only thing that was missing was a class with no teacher. As I was walking to my first class, I peered in every class, looking for one with students but to which the teacher was running late. I wouldn't be able to teach the whole period, obviously, but I could run out the game as long as the teacher was late. But time was of the essence. If I couldn't find a classroom quickly, I wouldn't get any teaching time as the teacher would walk in right after me. And if I made it to my first class before I found a teacherless classroom, I'd have to go in and sit down, thus missing my opportunity. 2 rooms before my class, I found it. A class with 25 students seated quietly, and no teacher in sight. I looked up and down the halls, and saw no sign of an educator coming, so I burst through the door and started talking. If everyone would please take their seats, I'd like to go ahead and take roll. There was silence. I glanced around and saw the teacher's nameplate on her desk. Mrs. T isn't feeling well today, so I'll be subbing for her. I understand you guys were told what you have to work on, but before we begin I'd like to take roll, so if someone could please show me where the class roster is. Out of nowhere, a student says, "Aren't you a student here?" Someone recognized me, but it didn't matter. If I played it confidently enough, he would get the idea, stop talking, and the rest of the class would be satisfied with my explanation. So I stopped, took a moment to act offended and frustrated and continued. "Yeah, I get that a lot. I know I look young, but no, I am not a student, and I would appreciate it if you raise your hand to speak." They were satisfied, and shot the student angry glances for asking such a seemingly offensive question. I continued, "I understand you all have some projects you're finishing or that need to be turned in today, so I'll go ahead and let you work on those presently. If one of you could please let me know the name of the project so I can track, for Mrs. T, what you were working on, I would appreciate it." One of the overly eager students perked up and explained the project details to me. This is about 5 to 10 minutes in now, so I'm starting to wonder where the teacher is, and if I'm going to actually fill up a 90-minute period. Just then, I see her, through a window, coming down the hall. I turn to the class. "Students, if I can have your attention." They put their pencils down. "I actually am a student. Today is my last day of high school, and you've been great. Thanks for letting me sub in," and I held the door for the teacher as she walked in. My mother wishes she baby garbaged me. I hate my mother. To put in a little context, I am not an only child. In fact, I have 3 half-siblings, 1 older sister and younger twins, also 2 girls, and we definitely do not look related. They have always had straight blonde hair with brown eyes, and I have always had brown curly hair with blue eyes. My dad, not by blood but I'm used to calling him that, is their father and has always treated me pretty well, but it's obvious he loves his real daughters more than me. I understand why, but it still hurts. My mother, though, has always acted horribly towards me. When I grew up she always just seemed as though she didn't really love me. She would always favor my sisters over me. It was little things. She'd give them an allowance over me, she'd constantly tell them she loved them, and would just spend more quality time with them over me. At the time I just thought that it was because they were girls. Maybe my mother just found it easier to spend time with them, so I tried to just spend time with my friends at school a lot, or even just play video games by myself. But, when I got to be a teenager, I started to notice that a few things were off when it came to my relationship with my mom. I'd see my guy friends' moms and how they'd make lunches for them, and tell them to have a good day, or even just embarrass them by kissing their cheek in front of our friend group. My other friends would tease them about it, but I was just confused at how their mothers were treating them. When I was about 15, my relationship with my mother got borderline abusive. My relationship with mom was never good, but at that point she was actively avoiding me. She wasn't exactly being subtle about it either. She'd constantly snap at me. She even gave me a few slaps at one point. She was a wild card. Sometimes she'd be angry at me. Sometimes she'd look at me like she hated me, but sometimes she'd just be afraid of me. Like she was afraid of her own son. My relationship with my sisters also took a left turn. They were always closer with mom, so when she told them to stay away from me they listened. The eldest was already at college at that point, but the twins were 5 years younger than me and were still in primary school, so they just listened to their mom and avoided me. My 16th birthday was when our fighting hit its peak. I had a great social life, and I wanted to go out with my girlfriend and a bunch of close friends instead of staying with my family, since at that point I wasn't that close with any of them. But, for some reason my mom wanted me to celebrate it with the family. This was probably because my dad had arranged for some family members to come over, but I just wanted to hang out with my friends. So, I told them to call it off. My mom didn't handle it very well. We fought really badly, and in her anger she basically told me she should have baby garbaged me because I was a rope baby. I was hurt partly, but I was mostly just confused when she yelled that. I demanded an explanation from her, and eventually she caved and gave me one. Apparently she was roped by a family friend at one point, and since she was married to my dad at the time she thought the baby was his. But, it wasn't, and when I was born it was clear who I really was. I tried to be understanding, really I did. It must have been traumatic for her, but when she was explaining herself it just felt so much like she was blaming me for what happened to her, as though I was somehow responsible. And just thinking about the way she'd never treated me with any love, or parental affection, the way she turned my own sisters against me, her paranoia about me resembling her rapist. It just felt so unfair. So, I snapped. I didn't need any big words, I didn't need to lose my crap, I just grabbed her by the collar and made sure to glare at her as I very clearly stated that I hated her. Maybe it's wrong to hate your own mother, but that's how I feel. I had a massive fight with my sisters and dad that day, and it just ended with me storming out and crashing at my girlfriend's house. I explained to her what happened and she was understanding. She's an awesome woman. Probably why I married her. That was around 8 years ago. Obviously I didn't move out exactly after the fight, but my relationship with my family was strained at best for that year. I went to college and got a degree in civil engineering, then I settled down and married that girl I just mentioned. Life is good, if a little normal. As for how my relationship with my mom is right now, it hasn't changed much. She stopped by a year ago to see my son, her grandson, but she still hasn't apologized for what she said back then. At least my relationship with my sisters has healed pretty well. They are all adults now and stop by to see my son regularly. I know that maybe I should be cutting my mom some slack, but I just don't have it in me. She never seemed to really love me. I was about forgiving her when she came to meet my son, but when she actually showed my boy more affection than she ever did me, I realized that maybe it's best to let sleeping dogs lie. She clearly can't see me as more than her rope baby, and I can't see her as my mom. She can live her life if she wants, and I'll live mine. My mom is mad I decided to leave for college earlier than necessary. For some background info, I had posted on Am I the A-hole before about how my older brother would constantly eat everything in the house and not contribute anything to the family. He's 23. We would then be left with bread, water and pasta while him and his girlfriend would constantly go out for food while also paying no bills and leaving everything on my mom. I have a gluten problem so I can't eat bread and pasta and I'd essentially be left starving almost. Once I did get a job I'd buy things I'd be able to eat, gluten-free products, and he still eat everything up in 2 days, and for the next week I was left to starve again. It got to the point where I had lost so much weight my doctor was concerned. He recommended I started to drink some protein shakes and get a better balanced diet. I had bought a few cases of Ensures and when I went to get them the next day they were all gone. So I immediately purchased a mini fridge and installed a lock on my door. This was fine for about 3 months until I came home and my door was removed and my mother berated me and basically yelled at me for holding out on them. Anyways, to sum that part up, for the next few months nothing changed, but I was able to eat a little more and I'm up to a healthy weight. I also got a full ride to my top college and they invited me to their honors college and a summer program which will give me college credits and they'll also fly me out to them. All I'd have to pay for was my dorm supplies and clothes if I wanted any new ones. When I told my mom about it she immediately said no to the program and to college because I'd be leaving her and she needs me because I'm her rock and I can't just leave her with my brother. Like okay? Then kick him out and live by yourself. This is the same man she protected and kept taking his side during arguments. Everyone in my family has cut him off but her. After like 3 arguments about the program I enrolled. Anyways, because my grandparents gave me money to pay for my enrollment and board fee which was like $500. But since I'm 17 they emailed her to confirm if I could go. Luckily she was cooking so I just ran into her room and accepted it myself and deleted the email. Well, the program starts June 11th and the whole week before that I was packing and slowly hiding things in my grandparents' house until it was time for me to leave. I don't know how but my mom found out and called the college to say she never signed the slip and that I would not be enrolled, keeping me from going to college. She then broke my computer saying that I won't need it since I won't be going to college anyways. I had called the college and there was nothing I could really do since I was a minor at the time, but 2 weeks ago I turned 18 and explained my situation to the college and they let me continue the program but said I'd have to pay for the flight down here myself. After that I called my grandma and had her come get me and the rest of my things. My mom was pissed. She was screaming, crying and yelling asking me how could I just abandon her with my brother after all she's done for me. I still have the knot on my head from her tackling me and making me bang my head against our concrete stairs. My grandparents asked me if I wanted to press charges but honestly I just want to be away from her. She keeps texting me after what happened and said she's going to sue me for emotional damage but that's not likely since she can't even afford to feed her family. I'm living with my grandparent now and I've never been more fed. I think I'll get all my strength back before I leave my grandparents' house. This is all honestly crazy for me because she's never acted like this. This past year she's been on a downward spiral. A 911 call where nothing made sense. Things were fucked from the beginning. A woman named Carol dials 911 and claims that somebody's inside her house. We go investigate, searching the place inch by inch but find nothing. Usually, this could be easily explained away. The mind of an older person living alone eventually starts deteriorating. The onset of dementia and other mental issues start to take a toll on their lives. Quite sad, really. However, this woman is only 24. In other words, the probability of this all being inside her head is extremely unlikely. She also seemed to be terribly distraught by this whole situation. Why would she be acting? We leave her place and tell her to contact us if she sees anything again. I mean, we couldn't really do anything at that point. We were somewhat surprised when we got another call from her the very next day. We drive down there and search the house again. We find nothing. Again. Problem is, the house seems different this time. Almost as if there was some subtle detail that made it a separate place from the one we were in yesterday. My partner, Beck, says that he noticed it as well, but doesn't quite understand what's wrong. We decide not to say anything about this as we tell Carol that we came up with nothing. However, she tells us to stay. I recorded him, she says. She takes out her phone and tells us to watch the video that she's pulled up. It was footage of her in the house. She's running around, breathing frantic. And then we see him. A large figure, covered head to toe in what appears to be a black bodysuit. He lumbers towards the camera as Carol screams and ducks into a room, locking it from the inside. There's a few bangs on the door before we can hear footsteps walking away. We don't know how to react to this footage, but we try anyways. We come to the conclusion that the man must have left once Carol got behind the door. However, the front door was locked when we came, and Carol told us that she hadn't left the room. Did he also have the keys to her house? That would explain a lot, but it also made this situation a lot worse. We decide to keep an eye on her house for the night. We're discreet, parking about a block down the road in an unmarked car. We're both fully awake, ready to go as soon as we see some sketchy shit. At around 2 a.m., we see somebody walking across the road, towards her house. However, it isn't the man. It's Carol herself. Beck and I must have had the same look on our faces. What the fuck? We get out of the car and make our way over there, knocking hard on the front door. However, nobody answers. We can see lights flicking on and off intermittently, but we're not sure what that's supposed to mean. Was she trying to tell us to leave? We get a call from dispatch a few moments later. They're telling us that Carol has called 911 again, saying that there are now multiple people in her house. They ask if we need backup. We say yes. Without another moment of hesitation, we force the door open and barge in. The living room lights still flicker on and off, but we see the light switch and nobody is touching it. We call out for Carol, but nobody responds. In fact, the place is dead quiet. I can see the neighboring houses starting to turn on their lights from the commotion. We rush up the stairs and start sweeping each room. But there's nothing. Once again, we search the place inch by inch, but nothing is in here, not even Carol, who we clearly saw enter a few moments earlier. As I pace around in petrified confusion, Beck speaks up. There's rooms here that shouldn't be. What the hell are you talking about? I ask in response. I've been counting, he says. There were 9 total the last time we came. There are 10 now. You didn't notice it? I forced myself to think hard. Subconsciously, I knew that something was off, but couldn't pinpoint exactly what. However, I eventually realize. The basement. There was only door down there last time. Beck nods. 2 now. I don't know what to think. I look at my surroundings and try to make an assessment, but there's really none that can be made. We hear a knock on the door about 10 seconds later. It sounds agitated. We look out the living room windows, but aren't met with the red and blue police lights. We're hesitant to answer, of course. I decide to take a step forwards, but Beck pulls me back. He looks at me and shakes his head, whispering, "We left the door open, remember?" He was right. My radio starts crackling. Another call from dispatch. They're telling us that we need to leave the house immediately. That Carol called again, saying we were going to die, in a deathly monotone voice. The knocking has stopped, but we can hear footsteps in the basement. Something is in here with us. We've decided that this was enough. We needed to get the fuck out of here. As we start descending the steps, we hear a voice coming from the kitchen. Carol comes out, blocking our path to the door. She looks detached, with blank, beady eyes staring right at us. "Did you find him?" she asks, without any semblance of emotion in her voice. "I think he might be in the basement. Why don't you go check?" Beck and I are frozen in shock. She just keeps looking at us, gesturing towards the basement door every now and then. The footsteps down there sound like they're running in circles now. We ignore her request, abruptly brushing past her and bolting out of the front door. The backup still isn't here, so we decide to just get into our car. However, we see somebody down the street peering through our driver's side window. He's large, dressed in what appears to be a black full-body suit. He looks away from the window and directly at us. It's hard to tell from this far, but the suit doesn't seem to have any eye holes. Beck speaks up. "Sir, please step back from the vehicle." His voice cracks in the middle of the sentence. He's terrified. As soon as Beck stops talking, the figure starts running towards us. It's fast. Too fast. In the time that it takes for us to pull up our guns, we've realized that it's actually moved past us, into the house. We waste no more time, running into the car, locking the doors and waiting until backup arrives. When it finally does, we're extensively questioned while what appears to be a SWAT team searches the house. However, it isn't the police chief asking us. Instead, it's some guy in a suit that we've never seen before. He asks us things like how many doors were there in the house? And what did Carol look like, exactly? And did we ever see a man with one eye wandering around? We answer inconclusively to pretty much all of them. We have no idea what the hell's going on. At one point, we see SWAT members carrying multiple stretchers outside and loading them into their truck. Not an ambulance, mind you, but their own truck. Eventually, the man who is questioning us tells us to go home, and to report to our station as usual. He tells us not to worry about what we've seen here. I don't know how he expects us to do that. We drive back to the station in complete silence. As we park, Beck finally lets out a sigh. Jack is fucking crazy, dude. I look at him in confusion. What are you talking about? Who the hell is Jack? He reciprocates an equally confused stare at me. What the hell are you talking about? The dude who owns the house. What? It was a lady named Carol. How'd you forget already? We hold each other's chaotic gaze for what feels like a minute. But we say nothing further. We both silently exit the vehicle and start heading our separate ways home. We both know that something's terribly wrong with the other. I try not to think about it too much as my head hits the pillow. I manage to drift off to sleep about 3 hours later, only to be woken up immediately by the telephone. Barely coherent, I answer it. We need you. A woman dialed 911. Says that somebody's in her house. My heart sinks slightly. It sinks completely when he tells me the address. It's Carol's. I hang up the phone and slump into the bed. I just want this nightmare to end. Have you ever been in a situation where you thought it couldn't get worse but it eventually did? Yes. My son passed away in the hospital when he was 6 days old. The hospital was to blame for his death and they accepted responsibility. I've written about this on Quora elsewhere. You'd be forgiven for thinking that the worst part of the heartache would be right there. It got worse, a lot worse. My husband and I were approached after our little one's death to ask for permission to do an autopsy. We were still shell-shocked and the approach was a very hard sell. We were told that we'd be helping other babies to live. We were made to feel that we'd be doing something wrong if we said no. We reluctantly agreed and were told that his body would be returned to us in 3 days. We made arrangements with the funeral home to collect his little body to prepare for his funeral. They were due to collect him from the hospital late on the evening of the third day. However, we had an unexpected visit from the funeral director early in the morning of day 4. He asked us to sit down as he had some news. He then went on to say, "I'm very sorry to tell you this, but the hospital can't find your baby." That was the beginning of a 3-week nightmare. The funeral director did everything he could to find him. Apparently, he was sent to another hospital for the autopsy. We hadn't been told that this would happen. Then they said that they'd returned him to the wrong hospital. Another day, they said they'd found him, but when the funeral director went to collect him, he was told that it was the wrong baby. I could go on. It was hell. After 3 weeks, the funeral director, who had been amazing through all of this, came to see us and said that he'd managed to find him. He looked so terribly sad. I wasn't convinced that he had found him and wondered if some agreement had been made somewhere to say that he'd been found. The funeral director was adamant that the casket had to be sealed as 3 weeks had passed. I can't quite remember, but I think he may have said that this was normal practice after an autopsy. I may be wrong, but that's somehow in my head. The internal turmoil went into overdrive. Can I insist on seeing inside? Would I be able to bear it? Do I want to know? What if it's not him? What will knowing change? Nothing can bring him back. After hours of agonizing conversation, my husband and I decided to accept what the funeral director said. It was enough. We'd been through enough. We felt in our hearts that nothing good could come from knowing. On the day of the funeral, my husband and I sat side by side in the funeral car. My husband was holding our baby's tiny, little, white casket. We didn't know if the casket really did contain our little one. I guess we'll never know. Did we do the right thing? Who knows? That question will always remain unanswered.
Teachers of Reddit, what is your best read the note to the class story? I don't know if this is the best, but it's pretty profound. I usually ignored note passing. If a student didn't want to pay attention but wasn't bothering anyone else, I was cool. In the age of cell phones, notes were kind of outdated anyway. So I had this student who could do origami like a boss, and he was always making all kinds of animal figures and cool shapes that I would put on the corkboard behind my desk. This one day he is getting his fold on and is completely focused and not paying attention. Before I know it, class is over and it's on my desk. He stops on the way out of my class and says, "You're gonna wanna read that." I read it and he asking for lunch money cause his mom took off and he was hungry. It hurts being a teacher some days. Not a teacher. Someone in my class had a cold and wiped their snot into a scrap piece of paper, as they didn't have a tissue. They then scrunched it up and left it on the side of their desk. Teacher saw this, thought it was a note and grabbed the paper, going through the usual fanfare of an importance not passing notes around. The look on her face when she opened it was priceless. I'm gonna surprise my dyslexic boyfriend and propose. Not sure if this is the right place for a post like this, but I feel like I'm gonna explode with happiness. I have been working on a surprise for my boyfriend for some time now. Some context, I love reading books and he loves hearing about them. But due to his dyslexia, most books take too long to read for him because he gets lost in the words if they contain too much information at once, at least how he explained it to me. On to the surprise, I have handwritten him a fantasy book that's easier for him to get through. His self-esteem isn't the best, so I want him to see himself through my eyes. I have ended the book with how I'm gonna give him the book as well as hidden an engagement ring in a hidden compartment inside the book. I can't contain myself with excitement. I'm really looking forward to the moment. He deserves to feel as loved and wanted as he makes me.
Redditors who grew up with strict parents, what was the most absurd rule you had to live by? I was grounded from the time I was 8 until I moved out. My stepmom would always find another reason to extend it, no matter how small, even just my bookcase being messy, and at some point it just became normal that I wasn't allowed to do anything and my dad didn't bother to fight it. And grounding for me didn't just mean I couldn't play video games, it was everything. I had no access to any kind of tech. She took away my alarm clock when she found out I was using the radio on it. I couldn't go outside, I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't be up past 8, yes, even in summer when I was 17, I couldn't leave my room without a good reason. I wasn't even allowed to be in my sister's room or talk to her at all. I lost my real mom at 5, and my stepmom came into the picture within the year. I was still nowhere near recovering, and felt like she was trying to replace my mom, so of course I wouldn't call her mom or anything like that. She and my father married when I was 7 without asking me or my sister, 3 at the time. My little sister was only 1 when my mom died, and didn't feel bad letting our stepmom be mom. She didn't even know anything else. She loved my sister and hated me, and I started doing worse and worse in school, giving my stepmom reason enough in my dad's eyes to keep me grounded that whole school year. It just never stopped after that. When I was 9, she found a cover to a corn DVD I'd found in the trash and beat me with the buckle end of a belt. My grandparents, mom's side, got pictures of the bruises, but were too afraid my dad would move me across the country to do anything. It was enough that she was never physical again, but she just started making me write sentences after that. It started out "I will not lie" 100 times, but that didn't keep me busy long enough, so she kept adding to it every time I did something she didn't like. The worst was when I was 14, and I ate some stevia packets from on top of the fridge, and told her I didn't know where the empty packets came from out of fear. I will not lie, I will not steal. God hates a thief and sin is death. 10,000 times. Due by the end of the month, in December. While I was writing them out, she came by my door, didn't say a word, and just set her belt on the doorknob. That was about as bad as it got, and honestly I consider myself lucky it never got worse. I went to my grandparents' house almost every weekend, and they tried to spoil me as best they could. They weren't rich, but they loved me and gave me everything they could. I wouldn't be anywhere near the kind of person I am today without them, and I'm so thankful they were a part of my life. They taught me how a family is supposed to show love, since my mom couldn't, my stepmom wouldn't, and my dad didn't know how. I don't know if anyone is going to read this, I'm kinda late to the thread, but if you got all the way here, thank you. I've been thinking about that part of my life a lot lately and it's helped to just get it out. It's a huge part of me that I'll never completely get past, but it's gotten easier. What's the shittiest thing someone has ever done to you? My 60-year-old mother-in-law wanted to sign her house over to us because she has no retirement and no money saved. My wife was pregnant with our second child and she told us she wanted to be a stay-at-home grandma. I would be coming in and paying for everything. So we sold our house, paid off our debt, and cut a check for $54,000 to her ex-husband, which paid off the house in full. Then I made $10,000 worth of home repairs. All bills were transferred in my name. When it came to sign the deal, suddenly she didn't want to do it. Told us she wanted things to go back to the way they were. My father-in-law told her, well then we need to take out a home equity loan to give him their money back. She refused. The next week she served us an eviction notice and moved her boyfriend she claimed was abusive to her back in 2 days later. She threw her own daughter, my 3-year-old, and my 3-month-old baby on the streets. We tried to reason with her and then she had her lawyer threaten us with a restraining order. So now I'm suing her for my money back. Luckily my father-in-law is on our side and we were able to stay with him for the time being.
My fiancé doesn't want to sleep with me because of something I did years ago. My fiancé put up a pillow barrier in our bed and won't take it down. This problem goes back, way back. I'm almost 38, so is he, we're only 3 weeks apart. I'll call him Caleb for this post. Caleb and I met when we were 14 years old in drama club at a Catholic high school, so we have a lot of history. We have been together for 17 years, though we've known each other for 24 years. We're also getting married in 2 weeks, but that's not really relevant here. I've been a terrible sleeper all my life. It started back in high school when my family moved to another city and my room ended up being in the basement. I got used to sleeping in complete darkness and silence and being more comfortable on the colder side. Every sleeping situation I've had to deal with since then has been a downgrade in some way, whether it's too bright, too warm, or too noisy. I also hate the feeling of my skin touching itself, so I wrap my sheets around every limb, even between my fingers, to keep everything separated. Over the years, I've had to adapt to this by using the highest NRR earplugs I can find, putting up blackout curtains over all windows, and keeping the AC set to 66 F or lower. I also buy oversized sheets to allow for the extra fabric yardage I need to keep my skin from touching itself. It's still not perfect, but it works for the most part. Of course, that means Caleb, as well as any exes, have had to deal my insanity as part of the package of being with me. I recognize I'm lucky to have landed a man at all, trust me. Even when my sleeping terms have been met, I'm still not always a polite sleeping partner. An ex once described my behavior as like a corpse in a washing machine. He was so frustrated that he also took a video of my antics one time to show me what I'm like, and honestly his description was accurate. A couple years ago, Caleb finally had enough of my crap and suggested we get separate. Duvets. We have a lot of Scandinavian friends for some reason, and I guess they told him it's normal for couples in their part of the world to have their own duvets, so he brought this up as a way to help bring some peace to our bed. I was a little sad since it would cut into cuddle time, but I agreed. At the time, we were sharing a full-size bed since that's all we could fit into our tiny NYC apartment, and we still slept pretty close to each other, so it wasn't so bad. We've since moved out to the suburbs and are enjoying a much larger living space and are now sharing our first king-size bed. While the upgrade has been great, it feels like I'm sleeping on another continent from him. Ever since getting our new bed, he has been so much happier. He won't shut up about how much better quality sleep he's getting. Whatever, it's fine. A couple weeks ago, though, he decided to add a new feature to our bed. He stacked these 2 long pillows on top of each other and put them between us, like a stupid pillow barrier or something. Picture included. I can't help but feel a little offended that my own fiancé doesn't want to even look at me while we're in bed together. I told him I hate the barrier and I've knocked it over multiple times, but he just puts it back up each time and then tells me it's here to stay. Caleb claims that 1. Serves as protection from my violent flailing limbs, 2. Acts as a sound barrier because evidently I also talk a lot in my sleep and sometimes I scream, and 3. Blocks some light that seeps in from our bedroom door that we have to keep open because otherwise our giant German Shepherd will lose her mind and make a scene. Last night I punched the top pillow on the barrier so hard the pillow flew across the room and Caleb had to get out of bed to reassemble the barrier, which really annoyed him. He wouldn't talk to me about any pillow barrier related topic for the rest of the night. Should I just drop it and accept this stupid pillow barrier as a part of my life now? I don't know my alternatives besides a straitjacket and maybe some type of face muffler. And for anyone wondering, we're still in love with each other and I'm not concerned about the integrity of our relationship. The sex is still great and that hasn't changed. We don't really fight or argue about anything, ever. I can't even remember the last time we got into a serious disagreement. On the spectrum of severity of relationship advice posts, I agree this is dumb. My fiancé doesn't want to sleep with me because of something I did years ago. You were right, I'm autistic. I'm the crazy person who received a swift and unified response from the post that I was wrong in the situation. I can't link my post because it was locked and then removed, but long story short, my fiancé, now husband, had constructed a pillow barrier between us in bed. This was an escalation after he had requested we use separate covers. To this poor man's defense, it is because I'm a horrible person to sleep with. I'm violent, and I talk, cry, and scream at least a few nights a week. While the pillow barrier initially hurt my feelings because I love him and our cuddle time, the feedback I received was to not be so selfish and let the man do what he can to get his sleep. Some of you were kinder than others in packaging this response, but pretty much everyone agreed. There were a few posts, though, that mentioned that the sleeping troubles I have, oversensitivity to light, sound, heat, touch, sounded like a sensory processing order and suggested I was autistic. It was hard for me to really consider that given how old I am, 38, and would have hoped it would have been caught by now. I'm no stranger to psychiatrists or therapy. Well, I started reading up on adult autism and as I was reading typical symptoms I swear my jaw was gaped open. All these things I assumed were just quirks or otherwise unrelated characteristics of my personality were all strung together under one diagnosis. Sometimes being so nervous about when to speak up that I end up not saying anything at all. I went 3 months after starting this new job without saying a word during meetings, and then crying afterwards because I thought I was stupid and didn't deserve the promotion, difficulty coping with change, went into a deep depression after a new job, after engagement, after we bought a house. Sensitivity to light, sound, smell, touch. I hate being touched or hugged by anyone other than my husband. Embarrassingly, I do make a lot of weird sounds and voices. I just thought I was a little quirky, but I guess it's deeper than that. The thing that got to me were autistic meltdowns. The entire reason I ever sought out therapy was because there were so many occasions where I honestly could not control my words or actions, totally blinded by emotion. I assumed this was some degenerate characteristic I inherited from my abusive father. Luckily for me, the worst it's ever come out has been as a snippy email or an annoying interaction at work. Nothing to breach professionalism, but still, these things would get me so worked up they'd consume me. I fixate on it for hours, sometimes days. Most times I wouldn't have an outburst, but keep it inside and be filled with a blind rage so strong all I could do was hold my head and cry and wait for it to be over. I'd write scathing emails to people and then delete them, make up imaginary conversations where I really let them have it, and in general just stewed in my anger. It was so bad sometimes I'd just shake and hold myself in my office to try and calm down. I started meeting with a psychiatrist to control that, which has been successful so far, I am happy to say. Well. Anyway. I told my therapist about all this and he referred me to a specialist. A child behavior specialist. It was a little embarrassing sitting in a waiting room designed for kids as a 38-year-old, but life goes on. We spent a while talking and she asked a lot of questions, but ultimately decided that my behaviors and thoughts are consistent with ASD. It's rocking my world, and a lot of my self-esteem, but at least it explains a lot. She mentioned there are a couple medications that could help my symptoms, but I'm already on Wellbutrin and Xanax and in regular therapy because of trauma I experienced and witnessed at a young age. My husband has been completely unfazed by all of this, at least. From his perspective, even if it's a new label for me, I've been able to piece together a decent life. I make good money working in a senior leadership position in a healthcare organization. I don't have many friends, but I do have a few. I love him more than anything and with the help of my therapist have spent the last year working on ways to show him how much I care and be a more present and loving partner. So there you go. Yes, I'm crazy as many of you confirmed, but now, I'm apparently autistic too. Oh, and the pillow barrier still stands.
My friend and I died in a car crash. I think I might have shared this already, but I need to go more into detail with what happened. About 6 to 8 years ago, my friend Giovanni and I left my house to go get some late-night McDonald's, just as young fellas do at 2 a.m. after a night of partying, and all. We got into his white Mustang, left the neighborhood, and began driving on one of the main roads towards McDonald's which was about 2 miles away. As we cross an intersection just about half a mile away from McDonald's, we get slammed by another car and thrown and we proceed to roll. All I remember from the impact is that the car was speeding very fast, the impact was brutal, glass shards flew everywhere, and the sound of plastic and metal scraping the asphalt. We died upon impact. We were gone, then it all just went black. I saw that the car was annihilated looking at it from above, the scene was distressing. Then just as soon as the scene played out of our deaths, it abruptly ended and we automatically went back and we were both standing at the front door about to leave to McDonald's. I look over at Gio, and Gio is tearing up and shaking with his hand on the doorknob. I say, bro, what the F was that? If we leave and go right now, we're going to die in a car crash. All he replied with was something along the lines of I know. Gio was shaking terribly, and I felt sick to my stomach. We had both just lived out our deaths. We both stepped away from the door and walked back into my family room and sat on the couch and didn't say a word to each other and just stared off into the distance. I had lived my own death, and so did he. We both knew it, and we both had no idea how to explain it. The best way I can explain it, is it felt like a dream where it's one of those almost too real of a dreams. We assuredly left the house and almost made it to McDonald's, but we got hit at an intersection then flashed back almost immediately to my house. Cheat on me with multiple guys at once? Enjoy being exposed as incest. Back when I was still in high school I was dating a beautiful girl named Jess. I tried my best to give her everything she ever wanted and was nothing but kind hands caring throughout our whole relationship. We were together for 18 months, and even though we were still seniors in high school, we talked about a future together. That future came to an end, when I caught the whole damn football team running a train on her at a party. I can explain. She tried to tell me after it was all said and done. I was willing to listen for some reason. She explained that although I was the man she loved, she simply could not forever have intimacy with someone with a 3.5-incher, and needed to cheat to get it out of her system. I forgave her and she promised me it wouldn't happen again. Well, it happened again. This time at least it was only one guy. That was the end for me and I ended the relationship. However, that was not the end of it. At first I tried to expose her as unfaithful, but her brother tracked me down and laid hands on me. He was a martial artist and a few years older as well as a few inches taller. He also had a few extra inches somewhere else. I paid attention to the python in his pants being by, but I digress. Once her brother let me have it I became extra determined to make her pay, and make him pay too. The way I went about this was setting up 2 fake online dating profiles, and swooning them both into matching with me. I knew just what to put in each bio to get a swipe and it worked. I swooned the girl using my knowledge of her as well as the assistant of Pickup Pal, an app in which I plugged in our conversation and it gave me a flirty response. This was used for our more spicy chats and it worked a charm on her. I'll probably use this app when texting girls I actually like too. I pretended to be just her type and she fell for me. I did the exact same thing with her brother, making him fall for me was easier. I just put a picture of a hot blonde as my profile and he was all in. Over the span of 4 months I got them to send a total of maybe 50 explicit photos between them. That, as well as a lot of flirtatious conversation. I never revealed myself to them. Instead what I did was just store all of these pictures. Throughout this time I learned Photoshop as well. I used my skills to make very realistic images of them together. Over 4 months I had around 15 very realistic images of them two together unclothed. I bought a very cheap spare phone, and considering I had their numbers from all the conversations, used this phone to send them these images. I sent them to no one else. The message attached to the photos said that if they don't stop what they're doing I will share these. I threw my phone away as I was not particularly interested in what they had to say. I never planned to share these with anyone. I was content with making them live in fear, in the fear of being exposed, as inbreeders. What does life look like after losing your college friends? I haven't shared this with anyone except my boyfriend, and I'm not sure why I'm choosing to share it here now when I'm already in my 4th year as a political science student at a state university. For the first 2 years of my college life, it revolved around online classes. Because of that, I often didn't join in the fun conversations in the group chat with my classmates because socializing felt tiresome. Most of the time, I only talked to them during group projects and then it stopped. I wasn't able to form a connection with them. There were a few whom I thought I was close to, but when face-to-face classes started in the first semester of the 3rd year in 2022, I realized they already had their own tight-knit group of friends. All my classmates seemed to have their own group of friends. I don't know what to do. I recently stopped taking antidepressants and antipsychotics. I've had several panic attacks because I'm extremely shy in person and I tend to overthink. I have a hard time initiating conversations or making jokes because I'm scared of offending someone. Another problem I have is that because we only have classes twice a week, often with class suspensions, absent professors, and no vacant time, it's difficult for me to build relationships. So every time I have face-to-face classes, I go home immediately after class. I can't join them on their outings because I also have financial and health problems to deal with. Luckily, we had a thesis at that time, so I had 4 groupmates whom I often spent time with. At first, it was okay. We ate together to brainstorm and all, but after that, they went back to hanging out with their other friends. As the thesis progressed, our relationship naturally deteriorated since it was only 3 of us working on it, and later on, it was down to 2 during the end of the 2nd semester. After we submitted and defended our thesis, there was no more communication. At that point, I just gave up. I didn't want to bother anymore. At the end of the day, I still enjoy my own company. Maybe I feel pressured because I see and hear that college life is better and happier with college friends. I'm not looking for friends who will stay forever or friends who I have to constantly talk to because most of the time, I get tired of socializing. The difficulty lies in not having someone to rely on when I'm frustrated with schoolwork, professors, or the system. I have no one else to talk to except my boyfriend and my family. I'm also not comfortable having lunch alone, so even just one friend would have been enough. I'm not a high-maintenance friend. I'm the type of friend who's always there to listen but doesn't share my own problems. I've always been the listener. I'm the one who laughs at your jokes and offers comfort. I always have a smile. I've been that way with my friends since junior high school. Maybe that's why I didn't make much effort to make friends this time around, because I got tired of being that kind of friend. And if I can't find friends who can reciprocate the energy I give them, then it's okay, I guess. What's the one thing someone told you that instantly changed your life? Sometimes all we need is a break. I'm a single mom of 3 boys. Dad died of suicide when they were 7, 6 and 4. A day after I got the phone call, I received another telling me my eldest needed major back surgery. We went through hell traveling 200 miles a few times before the surgery. Brothers in tow. We did this while mourning, me working full-time with little support, broke and scared. My mother asked me why I don't just give up, collect welfare and stay home with my kids. She said, exactly, you just can't do it. Why don't you give up? My employer made accommodations to have my son before and after surgery be able to come to work with me. He was having bowel and bladder accidents and after surgery, recovering on pain meds. Without her allowing him a comfortable space for me to keep an eye on him, we would have lost our apartment and car because I couldn't have worked. She was so good to him, bringing treats and checking on him herself while I was busy. She's a doctor. I had a hard time through the 12 years with her. That year was the worst. Months later I was in a car accident and was hurt pretty bad. The month after, my youngest had to go back and forth to a specialist 100 miles away for bladder and kidney issues. She asked how I was when my eldest went back to school and I broke down. I cried, hard. I was afraid it would always be so hard, and that I'd screw my beautiful boys up. She said, you are one of the smartest, most hardworking I know. The difference between you and the other people I associate with is that you don't have help, money or a nanny. You are an excellent mother and your children are so well behaved. You'll be just fine. Coming from a doctor who had an autistic son and twins, who had a medical degree, at the time I had just a GED, who was a very dry, hard person, it meant the world. She helped me persevere. She saw the potential I could not see in me. They're 20, 19 and 16 now. They love their mom so much and recognize the struggle. They are genuinely good kids and I'm proud of what I did rather than looking in what I couldn't. If it weren't for those words, I'm not sure we'd be where we are, in our own home, me graduating with a degree in just 3 weeks, them starting college and working. I love that woman. Obese people who lost the weight. What surprised you the most? I've lost about 60 pounds over the last 7 years. Slow and steady wins the race, and now weigh 165 pounds. I'm a 5 feet 10 inches 25 years old guy. Noticed a bunch of things. 1. There is an observable relationship between my weight and the weight of girls who are interested in me. 2. I can jump, run and walk upstairs without turning into a sweaty mess. I still go around jump on things because I now can. It feels great. 3. I've come to realize how much of my lot in life is tied to my appearance. Clothes do make the man, and I'm burdened by the knowledge that being skinny is objectively better in almost every way. But 4. Being skinny is not a panacea for all of my ills in life. I'm still awkward at times, I'm still an asshole at times, I'm still lazy and I'm not suddenly charismatic and socially brilliant. Losing weight really is just one thing I need to improve in my life, it's not a total solution. 5. Staying skinny requires a complete and perpetual lifestyle transformation. I don't eat sweets, I don't eat fast food, I don't keep snack foods in my house, I don't drink Coke or other sugary beverages, I don't drink alcohol other than vodka soda. If I slip up I gain weight, and so I have to be constantly vigilant. 6. I'm bony and it now hurts to sleep on my side because my hips dig into the bed whereas my fat provided another cushioning layer. 7. I was really fat. I've lost 60 pounds and I'm still pudgy. I often ask myself why I allowed myself to get so fat. And then I remember chocolate milk. Delicious, fattening chocolate milk. I am a psychology major from Harvard. Here are some crazy facts. 1. If you meet someone in a dangerous situation, your chances of falling in love increase. 2. When someone stares at your mouth during a conversation, they're probably thinking about what it would be like to kiss you. 3. Opposites attract is a myth. We are generally attracted to people with the same understanding of the world as us. 4. Women are influenced and persuaded by a man's sense of humor and sarcasm. 5. If after ending a relationship you still stay in touch, chances are one of you is still in love or never was. 6. Thoughts and ideas don't go away easily because we keep nurturing them every day. 7. Romance in the workplace is more likely to turn into marriage than meeting in bars or at friends' houses. 8. Thanking others more often makes you a warmer person. 9. When you don't have a friendship or your friendship isn't that intimate with someone, plus 5 seconds of pure silence can make the conversation very awkward. 10. Your energy introduces you even before you say anything. 11. Your voice changes a bit every time you talk to someone you find attractive. 12. When you just meet someone, refer them by their name. People love hearing their names. They will show more interest in you. 13. 70% of females use silence to express pain according to study survey. 14. Most drivers think that they are a better than average driver. 15. Make a person fall in love with themselves and they'll fall in love with you. Build a confidence and motivation in them. Be their guide or well-wisher, that person will automatically feel a strong affection towards you proved by psychology. 16. Attractive and honest appearance can easily be misleading. People tend to trust appearance more than sincerity. 17. An attractive face is preferred over an attractive body for long-term relationships. 18. Your shoes are much important than you think. People draw many conclusions about a person based on what shoes they're wearing. Buy a very good shoes to surpass this occasion. 19. If you announce your goal to someone, you are less likely to achieve it. So, keep your goal a secret even in an interview. 20. Research shows that just thinking about a plan B can make it less likely that you'll achieve plan A according to your behavior. 21. Females are more likely to say, I am sorry because they are more likely to think they have done something wrong. 22. Men socialize by insulting each other but they don't really mean it. Women socialize by complimenting each other, and they don't really mean it either. 23. The more complex the decision to be taken is, the more people tend to leave things as they are. If the store has too much choice and people cannot immediately find out which of the products is better, most probably they will leave without buying. 24. People generally change for two reasons. Either they've learned enough that they want to or they've been hurt enough that they have to. 25. Want someone to agree to a big request? Start small. Ask for something minor first, and once they agree, they're more likely to say yes to a larger request. It's like warming up in the gym before you hit the heavy weights. 26. Unfinished tasks stick in your mind more than completed ones. Use this to your advantage by starting projects you've been putting off. Once you begin, it'll bug you until you finish it. 27. When asking for favors, use the word because. No matter how simple the reason. The word because makes them think it must be okay because there is a reason.